Hello there, and welcome to Sleepy Science Channel. I'm so glad you found your way here tonight. Maybe you've had one of those long, heavy days, the kind where your body finally stops, but your mind keeps wandering a little longer than you'd like. Or maybe you're the other kind of listener entirely, the curious one, the sort of person who would honestly rather drift off to the mysteries of another world than lie there counting sheep. Either way, you're in exactly the right place. Whoever you are tonight, you're welcome here. And there's nothing you need to do now, nothing to follow, nothing to remember, nothing to figure out. You can let your shoulders soften, let your breathing slow, let your thoughts loosen their grip one by one. If your eyes are already feeling heavy, let them close. And if you fall asleep somewhere in the middle of a sentence, honestly, that's perfect. That's the whole idea. Because tonight, we're not studying anything. We're taking a slow journey together, out past the moon, across a stretch of quiet space, to a small red world that has been watching us from the dark for as long as there have been eyes to look up. We're going to wander across Mars, not to conquer it, not to solve it, just to drift over its deserts and its canyons and its silent, rust-colored plains, and to sit gently with all the things about it we still don't understand. And there's so much we don't understand. There's a faint whisper of gas in its air that appears and then vanishes, and no one can quite agree where it comes from. There's a canyon so long it would stretch across an entire continent back home. There's a tiny moon that is slowly, patiently falling toward the planet it circles. And there are hints, written in dry riverbeds and ancient shorelines, that this cold desert may once have been a warm, wet, blue-skied world. Some of what you hear tonight may surprise you, or it may simply keep you gentle company as you drift off. And just before we begin, if these calm, curious journeys help you unwind or give you a softer way to end your day, you might consider liking this video and subscribing. It quietly helps other tired minds find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. Now, if you're ready, let's begin. Mars glows red because it is very slowly rusting. You might imagine that its color comes from heat, from something fiery or molten. But the truth is gentler and stranger than that. The surface of Mars is covered in a fine dust rich in iron. And long, long ago, that iron reacted with oxygen, the same quiet chemistry that turns an old nail orange after a season in the rain. Over countless ages, the winds lifted that rusted dust and spread it across the whole planet, tinting everything the soft color of dried clay. It's a little like an old tool left out in the weather for 1 billion years, slowly changing shade. And here's something to rest with as you lie there. The very same iron that stains Mars red is the iron moving quietly through your own blood, right now, with every slow beat of your heart. In a way, you and that distant world are colored by the same small thing. A single canyon on Mars is long enough to swallow a whole continent. Its name is Valles Marineris, and if you set it down back home, it would reach nearly from one coast to the other, stretching close to 4,000 kilometers. In places, it plunges several kilometers deep, deep enough that clouds could gather far below its rim. What's strange is that, unlike the great canyons of Earth, this one probably wasn't carved by a patient river. Most scientists think it cracked open when the crust of Mars bulged and split under enormous internal strain. a great tearing in the skin of the planet that never fully healed. It lies across the Martian face like an old scar, catching the morning light. There's something peaceful in the thought of a wound so ancient that it has simply become part of the landscape. The tallest volcano in the entire solar system stands quietly on Mars. It's called Olympus Mons, and it rises about 22 kilometers above the plains around it, which is very nearly 3 times the height of the tallest mountain on Earth. It's so wide that if you stood at its center, its edges would curve away below the horizon, and you might never guess you were standing on a mountain at all. It grew so impossibly large because Mars, unlike our world, has no shifting plates beneath its surface. On Earth, the ground slides slowly over the hot spots that feed volcanoes, spreading the lava into chains of smaller peaks. But on Mars, the ground held still, and the lava piled up in the same place for millions upon millions of years, like wax dripping onto a single spot until a tower forms. It rests there now, cold and enormous and utterly silent, a monument to a fire that went out long ago. Once, a vast ocean covered the entire northern third of Mars. It's hard to picture now, looking at that dry and dusty world. But the evidence is written into the land itself. The northern half of Mars is strangely low and smooth, like the floor of an emptied basin, and along its edges run features that look remarkably like ancient coastlines, the faint high water marks of a sea that has long since vanished. In its younger days, Mars was warmer and its air was thick enough to hold liquid water on its surface, and that water gathered into a single great ocean lapping against the southern highlands. Imagine a blue sea beneath a pink sky, waves moving under a smaller, paler sun. That ocean is gone, dried and frozen and lost to space, but the shape of it still lingers in the ground, the ghost of a sea remembered by stone. Mars keeps 2 small moons, and we're still not certain where they came from. They're called Phobos and Deimos, and they're nothing like our own round silver moon. They're tiny and lumpy, more like 2 dark potatoes tumbling through the sky, each only a few kilometers across. For a long time, many thought they were asteroids that wandered too close and were gently caught by the pull of Mars. But others believe they were born from Mars itself, from a ring of shattered debris flung up when something large struck the planet in its distant past. Both stories could be true, and both leave quiet questions behind. They drift over the Martian deserts, like 2 small stones set spinning and never allowed to fall, keeping their old secrets to themselves. Phobos, the larger of the 2 moons, is slowly falling toward Mars. With every year that passes, it drifts a little closer to the planet, sinking inward by roughly 2 centimeters, about the width of your thumb, drawn down by the steady pull of gravity. Now, this isn't the frightening thing it might first sound like. It won't come crashing down in some sudden, violent moment. Instead, over the next 50 million years or so, Mars will very gradually stretch and loosen the little moon until it breaks apart, and its pieces will spread out into a soft ring, so that Mars, for a while, will wear a delicate band of rubble across its sky. It's less a fall than a long, slow drifting down, like a leaf that takes an age to reach the ground. There's a strange tenderness in it, this quiet unmaking that no one alive will ever see. A faint breath of methane drifts through the Martian air, appearing and fading with the seasons. Methane is a simple gas, and on our own world, it's very often tied to living things, which is part of why its presence on Mars is so intriguing. Our robotic explorers have caught the faintest traces of it near the surface, rising and falling as the Martian year turns, and then, puzzlingly, thinning away again. It might seep up from slow chemistry deep within the rocks, where water and minerals react in the dark. Or it might come from something we haven't yet imagined. It appears like a whisper passing across an empty room, and then falling silent before you can be sure you heard it at all. For now, it remains one of those quiet uncertainties that Mars seems so willing to keep. Mars is a world split cleanly into two different halves. If you could smooth away the dust and look at the planet plainly, you'd see something almost unbelievable. The southern half is old and rugged and heavily cratered, standing high, while the northern half is low, young, and strangely smooth. The line between them is so distinct that scientists gave it a name, the crustal dichotomy, which simply means the crust wears two different faces. Some think an enormous impact long ago blasted the northern lowlands flat in a single, staggering blow. Others think the difference welled up slowly from forces deep inside the young planet. It's as though Mars is two worlds gently stitched together along a seam. And even now, no one can say for certain which story the seam is trying to tell. Dust storms on Mars can grow until they wrap around the entire planet. It begins small, a patch of lifted dust warmed by the sun. But the warm dust stirs the thin air, and the moving air lifts still more dust. And slowly, over weeks, the storm feeds itself until the whole world disappears beneath a rust-colored haze. And yet, for all their vastness, these storms are far gentler than the ones we know. The Martian air is so thin that even a wind howling across the desert would feel like little more than a soft push against your hand. There's no thunder, no roar, only a silent, spreading veil that dims the distant sun to a pale coin. It moves across the planet like a slow tide of powder, patient and quiet, until at last it settles again and the deserts reappear. The Martian sky wears the colors we'd least expect it to. Back home, we grow up knowing a blue sky by day and warm reds at sunset. But on Mars, the whole thing is gently turned around. Through the daylight hours, the Martian sky glows a soft, dusty butterscotch, a pale tan gold, because all that fine floating dust scatters the reddish light across the heavens. And then, when the sun sinks low, the sky closest to it turns a cool, quiet blue, as the same dust lets only that gentle color linger near the setting sun. Imagine watching a blue sunset fade over an endless rust-colored plain. It's a small reminder that even something as familiar as the color of the sky depends entirely on where you happen to be standing. At its frozen poles, Mars seems to breathe slowly with the seasons. Each winter, in the deep cold at the top and bottom of the planet, a portion of the very air itself freezes solid, settling onto the ground as a bright frost. Much of the Martian atmosphere is carbon dioxide, and when the polar winter grows cold enough, that gas turns straight to ice without ever becoming liquid, and the ice caps swell and spread. Then, when the warmth of spring returns, the frost lifts back into the air, and the caps shrink again, and the whole planet's atmosphere thickens and thins in a slow annual rhythm. It's as though the world draws a long breath in through half the year and lets it out through the other half. There's a certain calm in a planet that keeps time so patiently. Dark streaks appear on Martian slopes as the weather warms, and then quietly fade. On certain sunlit hillsides, when the season turns and the ground grows a little less cold, faint dark lines begin to reach downward, as if something were trickling slowly along the slope. As the cold returns, they fade away, only to return again the following year. For a while, many hoped these were the marks of briny water, slipping to the surface for a short season before vanishing. Others believe they may simply be dry dust and sand, sliding gently downhill in the thin sunlight. They come and go like faint pencil marks that someone keeps drawing and softly erasing on the face of the hills. Whatever draws them there, they remind us that Mars, for all its stillness, is not entirely finished changing. A day on Mars is almost exactly as long as a day here at home. When we first imagine another world, we tend to picture something wholly strange, a place that keeps no rhythm we would recognize. Yet Mars turns on its axis at nearly the same pace as Earth, so a single Martian day, which scientists gently call a sol, lasts about 24 hours and 39 minutes, just a little longer than our own. Sunrise, midday, sunset, and night all unfold in a familiar order, only slightly stretched. It is like a clock built by the same hand, wound just a touch more slowly. There is something quietly comforting in that, the thought of a distant desert keeping almost the same hours you are keeping tonight. A single year on Mars stretches nearly twice as long as ours. Mars sits farther from the sun than we do, and the farther a world travels, the longer and lazier its path around the sun becomes. So while Earth finishes its loop in the span we simply call a year, Mars needs about 687 of our days to complete just one of its own, close to 2 Earth years for a single Martian one. A child born there would wait twice as long between birthdays, and each season would linger for many months. Its calendar unspools like a song played at half speed. To live on Mars would be to learn a slower kind of patience, measured against a sun that hangs far away. Mars is a surprisingly small world, only about half as wide as Earth. From the photographs, with all those canyons and wide russet plains, it is easy to imagine a planet as grand as our own. But Mars would fit inside the Earth many times over. Its width roughly half of ours, its whole surface about the size of all the dry land on our planet gathered together. Every plain, every ridge, every frozen pole is packed onto a globe, no larger than the continents you already know. It is a little like holding a smaller twin in your hand, one whose deserts, all added up, come out about equal to the dry ground beneath your feet. And yet this modest world carries some of the largest features anywhere among the sun's children. On Mars, you would weigh only a little more than a third of what you weigh right now. Because Mars is smaller and less dense than Earth, its gravity pulls with far less strength. Only about 38% of the tug you feel against your bed tonight. Someone who feels a certain heaviness here would feel startlingly light there, able to lift heavy things with ease and to walk in long floating strides. A stone slipping from your hand would fall more slowly, drifting down as if the whole world had grown gentler. Picture your own steps turning soft and buoyant, each one carrying you a little farther than you meant to go. It is a strange and pleasant thought to hold as you lie here, warm and heavy and still. Mars leans on its axis at nearly the very same angle Earth does. This tilt is what gives a planet its seasons. the slow leaning of first one hemisphere and then the other toward the sun. Mars tilts by about 25 degrees, only a whisker more than our own, which is why it too has its summers and its winters. But unlike Earth, Mars has no large moon to hold it steady, and so over millions of years, its tilt swings widely, wandering as far as 60 degrees before drifting back again. Its seasons rock back and forth like a cradle that no hand keeps still. Whole ice ages may come and go with that slow nodding of the poles, patient beyond anything a single life could ever witness. Mars once had a magnetic shield wrapped around it, and then, long ago, it faded. Here on Earth, a churning core of molten iron cloaks the whole planet in an invisible magnetic field, a quiet guardian that turns aside much of the sun's harsher wind. Mars almost certainly had such a field in its youth. But as the small world cooled, its inner engine slowed and the field weakened until at last it was gone. What remains are faint magnetic stripes locked into the oldest rocks of the southern highlands, like the memory of a melody lingering long after the music has stopped. They are the fingerprints of a warmer, more sheltered Mars, pressed into stone billions of years ago. The air on Mars is thinner than the air above our very highest mountains. If you could somehow stand there without a suit, the atmosphere would press against you with less than 1/100th of the weight our own air carries down at sea level. It is so sparse that liquid water cannot linger on the surface for long, and the warmth of daylight escapes almost as soon as the sun goes down. What little air there is drapes the planet in the faintest of blankets, barely there at all, and still, it is enough to carry thin clouds, to lay down frost, and to move the slow drift of dust from one horizon to the next. Mars is slowly losing its air to space, one particle at a time. With no strong magnetic field left to guard it, the thin Martian atmosphere lies open to the steady stream of particles the sun breathes outward, what we call the solar wind. Bit by bit, over billions of years, that wind has carried the upper air away, peeling it off into the dark and leaving the planet drier and colder than it once was. It escapes so gently that you would never see it happen, like steam rising unnoticed from a cup left out overnight. Somewhere high above Mars, even now, the last faint threads of an ancient sky are quietly slipping away. Beneath the dusty plains of Mars lies a great deal of hidden ice. For a long time, we thought of Mars as bone dry, a desert through and through. But instruments circling overhead have sensed enormous stores of frozen water tucked just below the surface, especially away from the warmer middle of the planet. In some places, the ground is believed to be part ice and part soil, and elsewhere, whole glaciers seem to lie sleeping beneath thin coats of dust. The planet keeps its water put away, out of sight, like a cellar stocked against a very long winter. It waits there in the cold and the dark, patient and unhurried, held for a spring that may never quite arrive. If all the frozen water at the Martian poles were to melt, it could wrap the whole planet in a shallow sea. The bright caps at the top and bottom of Mars are not only frozen air, they also hold vast layers of water ice, stacked and pressed down over untold ages. Should that ice ever turn to liquid and spread evenly across the globe, some careful estimates suggest it would cover the entire surface in water several meters deep. For now it stays locked in place, gleaming and silent under a pale sun. There is a whole ocean resting up there, folded flat and white, dreaming of a warmth it has not felt in a very long time. Across the face of Mars run the dry beds of rivers that stopped flowing long ago, winding channels, branching valleys, and the wide fanned shapes of old deltas mark the land, the kind of patterns that only running water tends to leave behind. Billions of years ago, it seems, water once moved freely here, carving its way downhill and gathering into lakes before the world grew cold and the rivers fell silent. Now those channels lie empty and dust-filled, their banks still curving as gently as they did when the water passed through them. They are like the soft lines left on a face by smiles it no longer makes. The rivers are gone, but the shapes of their passing remain, waiting quietly in the dry light. Scattered across parts of the Martian ground lie countless tiny gray spheres. When one of the rovers first rolled out across a wide plain, it found the soil sprinkled with small round pebbles, each no bigger than a peppercorn, which the scientists fondly nicknamed blueberries. They are made largely of an iron-rich mineral that here on Earth usually forms in the presence of water. So finding them there was another gentle clue that Mars was once a wetter place. They lie half buried in the dust by the thousands, smooth and still, like beads spilled long ago and never gathered up. Each little sphere is a small, round memory of water, holding its secret quietly in the cold. The smaller of Mars's two moons is drifting slowly outward, away from the planet. We already know that the larger moon is easing gradually inward, but the tiny outer moon, called Deimos, does the very opposite, inching a little farther from Mars with each passing age. Deimos is a small, lumpy thing, dark and dusty, barely more than a mountain adrift in the sky. So faint and distant is it that from the Martian ground, it would look almost like a bright star, wandering slowly among the fixed ones. In time, in unimaginable stretches of time, it may loosen its hold entirely and slip away into its own orbit around the sun. Two small companions, and each one quietly following a different fate. The deepest place on all of Mars is a vast basin you could lose whole countries inside. In the southern half of the planet lies an immense round hollow called Hellas, gouged out long ago when something very large struck the young world. It sinks so far below the surrounding land that the thin air gathers a little thicker at its floor, and morning frost sometimes settles there. From its rim down to its lowest point is a drop of some 7 kilometers, deeper than nearly any valley we could name. It is like a great bowl pressed into the face of the planet by an ancient hand. On calm days, its floor fills with a soft haze, quiet and low, a hollow older than almost anything else on Mars. Tall spinning columns of dust wander alone across the Martian deserts. On warm afternoons, when the ground heats faster than the air above it, spirals of rising warmth begin to turn, gathering loose dust into slender whirlwinds. On Mars, these dust devils can grow far taller than any we see at home, some reaching many kilometers up into the thin sky as they drift across the plains. They trace long curling tracks in the pale dust, dark scribbles the rovers have photographed from far below. They look like wandering ghosts made of sand, twirling softly across an empty land. And then, as quietly as they rose, they lean, they thin, and they fade back into stillness. Mars trembles now and then with quakes of its own. A lander set gently on the surface once carried an instrument sensitive enough to feel the faintest shivers running through the ground. And over its years of patient listening, it caught the planet stirring hundreds of times. These Marsquakes are far softer than the great earthquakes we know, more like a long, low murmur passing through the rock. By studying how those tremors travel, scientists have begun to map what lies deep inside Mars, sketching the shape of its hidden core the way you might sense the size of a dark room from a single echo. The planet, it turns out, is not entirely asleep. It hums to itself, very softly. From somewhere far within, small pieces of Mars have traveled all the way to Earth on their own. Long ago, great impacts struck the Martian surface hard enough to fling shards of rock clear off the planet and out into open space. A few of those fragments, after drifting for ages, happened to cross Earth's path and fell to the ground as meteorites, and we have since found them, still carrying tiny bubbles of Martian air sealed inside. So a small handful of Mars already rests in our hands, gathered up from deserts and ice fields here at home. It is a strange kind of letter, sent across the emptiness with no sender and no words. We opened it millions of years after it was sealed. Strange, dark patterns spread across the Martian south each spring, fanning out like the shadows of spiders. Through the long polar winter, a layer of frozen carbon dioxide settles over the ground, and sunlight passing down through that clear ice warms the soil beneath until the ice begins to turn to gas from below. The trapped gas builds and builds until it finally bursts upward through a crack, carrying dark dust along with it and spraying it across the frost in long, branching fans. Over the seasons, these vents etch spidery channels into the ground, reaching outward like fine cracks in old glass. They appear, they darken, and they fade away again, drawn afresh each year by the patient hand of the returning sun. Sand dunes on Mars drift slowly across the ground, one grain at a time. On Earth, we tend to think of dunes as fixed things, the still shapes of a desert. But the dunes of Mars are quietly on the move. The thin Martian wind is far too weak to lift much at once, yet season after season it nudges the sand along, rolling and hopping the finest grains up one gentle slope and letting them spill down the other side. Over many years, whole dunes creep forward, their crests advancing like the slow hand of a clock you could never quite catch moving. They ripple across the plains like the frozen waves of a sea that forgot how to break. Nothing here is truly still, it seems, only patient beyond our reckoning. Morning frost settles softly over the Martian ground. When the long cold night draws down, a little of the water and carbon dioxide in the air gathers on the chilled soil and rocks, dusting them with the palest coat of white. As the small sun climbs, that frost doesn't melt into water the way ours would. In the thin air, it simply turns straight back into vapor and lifts away, gone before the morning is old. One of the landers even watched a thin skin of frost come and go across its own footpad, there at dawn, vanished by mid-morning. It's the faintest breath of winter, laid down and lifted each day like a sigh. And then the ground is bare again, waiting for the next quiet cold to come. At the Martian poles, snow made of dry ice drifts gently down. On Earth, snow is frozen water, but in the deep polar winters of Mars, the air grows so bitterly cold that carbon dioxide itself begins to freeze. It forms tiny crystals high in the dark and lets them fall. A snow made of the very gas we breathe out, settling silently onto the caps. These flakes are thought to be small, almost a fine glitter rather than the soft clumps we know, sifting down through a night that can last for months. Imagine a snowfall you could never catch on your tongue, drifting through a silence colder than any we have ever felt. It gathers there season after season, white upon white, patient and untouched. Ancient lakes once filled some of the great craters of Mars. Where today there is only dry rock and dust, rovers have found the telltale signs of standing water. Fine layers of mud turned to stone, rounded pebbles smoothed as if by a gentle current. In places like the wide bowl of Gale, water seems to have pooled and lingered for a very long time, rising and falling across the ages. The little rover crawling there has read those layers like a slow book of stone, each band a chapter of a wetter world. You can almost picture a still lake under a soft pink sky, its surface barely stirring. Long drained now, it waits in the rock as only a memory of water. A river once spread wide and left its delta frozen in the stone. In a crater named Jezero, the ground fans out in exactly the shape a river makes where it slows and meets a lake, dropping its load of sand and silt into a broad, branching spread. Seen from above, the old channels and layered banks look startlingly like a river mouth here at home, only stilled and turned to rock long ago. A rover sits there now, gathering little cores of that ancient ground and sealing them to wait for a journey back to Earth someday. It's a shoreline with no water and no sound, holding the shape of a current that ran dry an age ago. The river is gone, and yet the memory of its patience remains. Long ago, gentle rain fell from the skies of Mars, under a thicker, warmer air than the wisp it wears today. The young planet held enough heat for water to move freely across its face. Rain gathered into streams, streams into rivers, and rivers into standing seas, carving the valleys and filling the basins whose ghosts we still trace. It was a softer world then, wrapped in cloud, its rock washed by weather much like our own. Picture a quiet drizzle falling on red hills beneath a hazy sun, long before anything here was watching. That warmth faded, and the rain with it. But for a while Mars knew the simple grace of falling water. Thin clouds drift high above Mars in the afternoons. They are not the heavy gray blankets we know, but delicate wisps of water ice, and sometimes frozen carbon dioxide, floating far up in the cold and rarefied air. When the light of the low sun catches them from beneath, they can glow with the palest shifting tints, drawn out in long feathery streaks. The rovers have looked up and filmed them sliding by, silent and unhurried, casting the faintest shadows on the ground below. They look like brushstrokes left drying on a wide, quiet canvas. High and untroubled, they wander the Martian sky and ask nothing of anyone. The wind carves long ridges into the bare Martian rock. Over unimaginable stretches of time, that faint but ceaseless breeze lifts fine grit and drives it low across the surface, wearing the softer stone away and leaving the harder stone standing. What remains are smooth, streamlined ridges, all combed the same way, pointing like fingers along the path the wind has taken for ages. Scientists call these shapes yardangs, and on Mars they can run for many kilometers, long parallel spines etched into the land. They lie across the ground, like the grain in a great slab of weathered wood. The wind wrote them slowly, and just as slowly, one distant day, it will smooth them away again. Pale veins of bright mineral thread through the darker Martian rock. In several places, the rovers have rolled up to slabs laced with thin white lines. And up close, these turn out to be a mineral rich in calcium and sulfur. the kind that forms when water seeps through cracks and leaves its dissolved cargo behind. Each little vein is the fossilized path of an ancient trickle, the fingerprint of water that once moved unseen through the stone. They branch across the rock face like the veins on the back of a leaf held up to the light. Long after the water dried away, its quiet handwriting stays, bright against the red. The Martian soil is salted with strange chemicals. Scattered through the fine red dust are compounds called perchlorates, a kind of salt that is rare and thinly spread here on Earth, but seems to lie widely across Mars. They are curious things, lowering the freezing point of water so that any moisture might stay liquid a little longer in the cold, and yet unkind to life as we know it. Their presence is one more riddle folded into the dust underfoot, a small complication hidden in the ground. They rest there like grains of a seasoning no one will ever taste. Whether they helped water linger or kept living things away, they lie quietly in the soil, keeping their own counsel. The Martian day and night hold temperatures far, far apart. Because the air is so thin, it stores almost no warmth. So whatever heat gathers under the noon sun escapes the moment the light is gone. Near the equator, the ground might feel almost mild in the early afternoon, and then, by the dark hours, plunge to a cold deeper than any winter you have ever stood in. If you were resting there tonight, wrapped against that chill, you would feel the warmth drain from the air the very instant the sun slipped below the rim. It's a place that forgets its own heat as quickly as it gathers it. And through all of it, the thin wind moves on, indifferent and calm. Mars swings much closer to and farther from the sun across its long year. Its path around the sun is more of a stretched oval than ours, so the distance between the planet and the sun changes a good deal as the seasons turn. When Mars draws nearest, its southern half leans into a shorter, warmer summer, and when it drifts far away, that same summer stretches long and mild instead. This uneven journey gives the two halves of the planet seasons of quite different temper, one sharper, one gentler. It travels its wide ellipse the way a swing rises and falls, never quite the same on either side. Round and round it goes, patient in its lopsided loop about the sun. Sound itself travels differently through the thin Martian air. A rover carried the first microphones ever to listen on another world, and what they heard was a place far quieter than home, where the sparse air carries sound weakly and lets it fade fast. Higher notes and lower notes even travel at slightly different speeds there, so a sound would reach you a touch out of tune, its pieces arriving just barely apart. The rover caught the hum of its own workings, the soft whir of a little flying machine, and the faint sigh of the wind. It is a world that speaks in whispers and swallows most of them before they carry very far. To listen on Mars is to lean into a hush. A small helicopter once rose into the Martian sky. In air barely 1/100th as thick as ours, flight seemed almost impossible, and yet a machine no larger than a small table spun its blades fast enough to lift gently off the ground. Again and again it climbed, hovered, and set back down, the first craft ever to fly under its own power over another world. Its blades had to whirl far faster than any helicopters here, beating against the thin air to find the smallest purchase. For a while, it drifted above the red land like a dragonfly exploring a still pond. Then, its long task done, it came to rest at last upon the dust, quiet beneath the wide, pale sky. faint auroras glow now and then across the Martian night. On Earth, the northern lights are drawn into ribbons by our planet's magnetic field. But Mars long ago lost its global shield, so its auroras behave in stranger, softer ways. Sometimes a diffuse glow spreads broadly across the whole night side, kindled where particles streaming from the sun rain down onto the thin upper air. It is a light too faint for a human eye to catch, seen only by patient instruments looking down from above. Still, it is there, a dim shimmer breathing over a world with no compass to guide it. Even a planet that lost its magnetism can, it seems, still catch a little fire from the sun. Once, a comet passed close enough to brush the Martian sky. Not so many years ago, a small wanderer of ice and dust swept by Mars far nearer than any comet comes to Earth. Close enough that its faint haze would have drifted through the upper air. The little fleet of spacecraft orbiting Mars turned to watch, and even tucked themselves behind the planet as the dusty tail went by. For a short while, a scattering of cometary dust may have flared as tiny shooting stars in the Martian night. It came, it whispered past, and it slipped away again into the long dark of its orbit. A brief visitor, gone almost as soon as it arrived, leaving the red world quiet once more. The Martian poles hold layers stacked like the pages of a book. Where the ice caps rise, their walls reveal band upon band of ice and dust, laid down in alternating light and dark across enormous spans of time. Each layer records a turn of the Martian climate, a season of the planet's long, slow wobble on its axis, written faithfully into the frozen ground. Read from top to bottom, they hold a diary of ancient weather no one was there to see. They lie pressed together like the leaves of a book left open to the cold. Layer upon patient layer, they keep a record older than almost any memory we have. Phobos rises in the west and hurries across the Martian sky. The little moon circles so low and so fast that it outruns the planet's own slow turning, sweeping across the sky the wrong way compared with almost everything else. It climbs in the west, races overhead in a few short hours, and sets in the east, then comes around to do it all over again before the day is done. Twice in a single Martian day, it can cross from one horizon to the other, a small, pale lump of rock in a great hurry. It scuttles over the sky like a beetle crossing a wide, quiet floor. Small and swift, it keeps its odd little schedule far above the silent dunes. And if one of tonight's wanderings has stayed with you, or if you'd have told it a little differently, feel free to leave it in the comments below. I read them each morning, and they often become the seeds of journeys still to come. For now, let your breathing settle, let your shoulders soften, and let's drift a little deeper together. A mountain stands in the middle of a great crater, built up layer by patient layer. In one wide bowl in the Martian lowlands, a broad mound of rock rises from the crater floor until its summit lifts above the surrounding rim. Long ago, dust and mud and wind-blown grit settled here in sheet after sheet, slowly hardening into stone. And then the wind returned across the ages to carve much of it away again, leaving this lonely mountain behind. Its slopes hold the story of that long building and unbuilding, written in pale and rusty bands. It sits there like a sandcastle the tide half took and then forgot. A whole mountain, made not by fire, but by the quiet patience of settling dust. In some places, the ground of Mars looks as though it simply gave way. Instead of smooth plains or gentle hills, there are broad regions of tumbled blocks, jumbled together at odd angles, like furniture in a room no one has tidied for a very long time. The likeliest story is that ice or water once filled the spaces underground, and when it drained or melted away, the surface above had nothing left to lean on, and slowly sank and broke into these scattered mesas. There is no violence left in it now, only stillness. It rests like the rubble of a house whose owners moved away an age ago. The land here remembers a support it has long since lost. Some of the widest valleys on Mars may have been carved in only a handful of days. On Earth, we picture rivers taking thousands of quiet years to shape a canyon. But here, the marks tell of something faster and rarer. Deep pockets of water, sealed underground, appear to have burst free all at once and swept across the land in enormous, short-lived floods, scouring channels far wider than any river alive today. And then the water sank away, or froze, and the great gush was over. The empty channels lie there now, hushed and dry, like the bed of a stream that ran once and never came back. A flood that spoke loudly for a moment, then fell silent for the rest of time. Beneath the flanks of the old volcanoes run long, hollow tunnels of stone. When rivers of lava once flowed here, their outer skin would cool and harden into a roof, while the molten rock beneath drained onward, leaving an empty pipe running just below the surface. Here and there, the roof of one of these tunnels has fallen in, opening a round pit that peers down into the darkness, a doorway into a cave no light has entered. On Earth, lava makes tunnels just the same, though far smaller. Each pit is like a skylight set into the roof of a buried hall. Cool, sheltered, and out of the wind, these hidden passages keep their own steady quiet, far from the dust above. Hidden under a blanket of rubble, whole glaciers still lie slowly sleeping, away from the poles across the middle bands of the planet. There are gentle lobes and aprons of debris spread along the feet of cliffs and hills. For a long time, they looked like ordinary heaps of broken rock. But the ground beneath that thin coat of stone turns out to be thick with ice, ancient ice, insulated and preserved by the dust laid over it. They creep downhill so slowly that no eye could ever catch the motion. They rest like snowdrifts tucked beneath a coat of gray, waiting out a winter that never quite ends. Buried and patient, they hold water no one suspected for the longest time. Around some craters, the fallen debris lies in soft, frozen ripples, as if it once flowed. Most craters throw their shattered rock outward in a dry, powdery sheet. But a great many Martian craters are ringed instead by lobes of material that seem to have surged out and settled like drying mud. The gentlest explanation is that the ground here held ice, and the heat of the impact melted it just long enough for the debris to slide outward wet and smooth before it stiffened again in the cold. They fan out from each crater like the petals pressed flat around a flower. Even the scars of Mars, it seems, can carry the quiet signature of hidden water. Deep at the very center of Mars lies a core that is at least partly liquid. For a long while, no one could say what the planet held at its heart, until a lander set its sensitive ear against the ground and listened to the faint trembles rolling through the rock. The way those tremors bent and slowed as they passed through the middle of the world revealed a large core, warm and molten in part, cradled far below the crust. It sits there unseen, turning gently in the dark, the soft beating center of a cold red world. A hidden heart sensed not by sight, but by patience and a listening ear. In the oldest rocks of the southern highlands, a faint magnetism still lingers. Mars carries no global field to guide a compass now, yet the most ancient stretches of its crust hold their own quiet memory of one, frozen into the stone in long stripes and patches. When the rocks first cooled ages ago, they locked in the direction of the field that surrounded them then, and there it has stayed, a fossil of a shield long vanished. Why the stripes fall into the patterns they do, no one has fully worked out yet. Perhaps someone drifting off to a gentle story like this one will be the mind that finally reads them. For now they wait, faint and undisturbed, keeping the shape of a lost magnetism. Near the South Pole, the ground is pitted like the surface of a soft cheese. Across a broad plateau of frozen carbon dioxide, shallow round hollows and flat-topped mounds cover the land, growing a little wider each year as the seasons turn. When the spring sun touches this dry ice, it does not melt into liquid, but lifts straight into vapor, hollowing out these smooth-walled pits from below and around. Season after season, the same hollows deepen and spread. It looks for all the world like a wheel of paled cheese left out in the sun. A slow, patient carving, worked only by sunlight and the coming and going of the cold. Seen from high above, the northern ice cap turns in a great slow spiral. The cap is not a plain smooth dome, but a broad disc cut through by curving canyons and troughs that wind outward from its center, like the arms of a pinwheel frozen mid-turn. Over unimaginable spans of time, wind sweeping off the high dome has scoured these grooves and nudged them slowly around, so that the whole cap wears a faint spiral pattern etched into its ice and dust. It rests up there like water caught in the moment it began to swirl down a drain. A vast frozen coil, turning too slowly for any life to ever watch it move. When the sun goes down on Mars, it sinks into a pool of soft blue. All day the dusty sky glows a warm butterscotch, the opposite of home. And then at evening, the colors swap around once more. The fine dust scatters the warm light away across the sky, but lets the cooler blue gather close around the sinking sun. So a gentle blue halo pools where the light slips beneath the horizon. If you sat on a quiet dune at dusk, that cool blue glow would settle softly over your hands and the sand around you. It spreads like a drop of ink, loosed into still, pale water. A sunset turned inside out, calm and strange and lovely. On one dusty plain, there sits a low hill that once seemed to wear a face. In an old, grainy photograph taken from orbit, a mesa caught the light and shadow just so, and for a little while, it looked uncannily like a human face gazing up at the sky. Later, sharper eyes returned and saw only what was truly there, an ordinary weathered mound of rock, its features nothing more than a trick of low sun and coarse pixels. Our minds are simply built to find faces everywhere, even in the hills of another world. It lies there now like a cloud that looked like something for a moment, and then was only a cloud. A gentle reminder of how eager we are to see ourselves in the distance. Behind many Martian craters stretch long, pale tails, brushed out by the wind. As gusts sweep across the plains, a crater or a boulder shelters the ground just downwind of it, and there the dust settles differently, leaving a bright or dark streak pointing the way the wind was going. Read across a whole region. These tales become a map of the prevailing breezes, drawn patiently over years by nothing but moving air and drifting grit. They trail from each rise, like the wake behind a slow boat on a still lake. The wind cannot be seen here, yet everywhere it leaves its quiet handwriting on the ground. Unlike our own world, the crust of Mars is very nearly a single unbroken shell. Here on Earth, the surface is split into great plates that grind and drift and remake the map over long ages. But Mars seems to wear its skin all in one piece, still and fixed. Because the ground never slides away from beneath its volcanoes, molten rock could rise to the same spot again and again, letting a single mountain swell far larger than any our shifting Earth allows. So much of what makes Mars strange comes from this simple stillness. Its crust holds fast, like a lid set once upon a pot and never lifted since. A quiet, unmoving shell, keeping the shape it settled into long ago. On the cold walls of craters and valleys, small gullies branch like the veins of a leaf. High on many slopes, narrow channels begin in an alcove near the top, run downhill in slender threads, and spread into little fans of debris at the bottom, looking very much like the work of trickling water. Some may indeed be carved by brief flows of salty, half-frozen brine, others by dry avalanches of loosened grit sliding when the frost lets go. They fan down the slopes like the roots of a plant reaching quietly into the ground. Whatever hand shapes them, they trace the same soft downhill journey, over and over, in silence. The broadest swelling on all of Mars rises across nearly a third of the planet. On one side of the world, the ground bulges gently upward into an enormous raised region, crowned with the greatest of the volcanoes, and pushing the crust so hard that cracks and canyons opened along its edges. It grew as vast outpourings of lava piled up over a very long stretch of the planet's history, lifting the whole neighborhood high above the rest. It sits on the face of Mars, like a slow, wide rise in a blanket, gathered by something turning far beneath. A single great heave in the crust, older and larger than almost anything else the planet holds. And if one of these quiet corners of Mars has settled somewhere in your thoughts tonight, or if you find yourself picturing it a little differently than I've told it, you're always welcome to leave a few soft words in the comments below. I look through them gently in the quiet of the morning, and more often than not, one of them grows into a journey we wander together on some later night. There's no need to reach for anything now. Just let your breathing slow. Let the weight ease out of your hands, and let's drift on a little further into the calm. The tilt of Mars does not hold steady, the way ours mostly does, but wanders widely across the long ages. Here on Earth, our large moon acts like a steadying hand, keeping the lean of our axis gentle and nearly the same for millions of years. Mars has only its two little moons, far too small to hold it in place, and so its tilt is free to drift, sometimes standing almost upright, sometimes leaning far over onto its side. Each swing rearranges where the cold gathers and where the ice prefers to rest. It nods slowly through the dark, like a spinning top that leans a little more with every turn. What looks fixed to us is really a slow, patient sway, playing out over stretches of time longer than we can easily hold in mind. Mars has passed through ice ages of its own, quietly, again and again. When the planet leans far over on that wandering axis, its poles catch more sunlight and give up their frost, and the water travels instead toward the middle of the world, settling as ice and snow across lands that are now bare. Then the tilt eases back, and the ice retreats once more toward the poles, leaving faint mantles and smoothed slopes behind as clues. We seem to be living in one of the warmer, in-between times. The whole planet breathes cold in and out over the eons, like a sleeper shifting slowly beneath a heavy blanket, never quite waking. Far beneath the southern ice, faint echoes hint at something that might be liquid water. When spacecraft send radar down through the frozen cap, the signal that returns from one deep place comes back unusually bright, the way it would if it had bounced off water rather than solid ice. Some believe it may be a pool of very salty brine, kept from freezing by dissolved salts and the weight of ice above it. Others think it could be certain clays or cold, conducting rock playing a trick on the radar. It waits down there in the dark, like a held breath under a sheet of glass. No one is yet certain what it is, and perhaps someone drifting off to a quiet night like this one will be the mind that finally settles the question. In the oldest clays of Mars lies the memory of gentler water. Clay minerals form slowly when rock sits in mild, standing water that is neither too acidic nor too harsh, given long enough for the two to change one another. Where orbiting instruments find these clays spread across the most ancient terrains of the southern highlands. They are reading the fingerprint of a kinder, wetter world than the dry one we see now. It is as if the ground kept a pressed flower from a season long finished. The rock remembers a softness the surface has forgotten and holds it there, still and unhurried, for anyone patient enough to read. Some of the old rivers of Mars now stand above the very land they once cut through. This seems backward, for a river should carve a groove downward into the ground. But when a channel fills with coarse gravel and sand that later hardens, and the softer plains around it are slowly stripped away by ages of wind, the old riverbed is left standing up as a long winding ridge. The water is gone, yet its exact path remains, lifted into the light. It threads across the desert like a ribbon someone laid down and the wind forgot to take. What once ran low now runs high, a quiet reversal written patiently into the stone. Across some of the flatter plains, the ground is divided into countless gentle polygons. From above, the surface looks tiled, split into rough 4- and 5-sided shapes that fit together edge to edge for kilometer after kilometer. Ice buried just below the soil is the sculptor here, shrinking a little in the deep cold and pulling the ground into a mesh of shallow cracks, then swelling again, over and over through the seasons. We see much the same patterning in the frozen soils of our own far north. It spreads like the fine crazing on the glaze of an old, well-loved bowl. Beneath that quiet lattice, the ice keeps its slow rhythm, tightening and easing without a sound. One great region of Mars is made of something soft enough for the wind to carve almost as it pleases. This place is a vast, pale deposit, thick and fine-grained, thought by many to be the ash and dust of enormous ancient eruptions, settled and lightly bound. Because it is so easily worn, the wind has combed it into long ridges and grooves and strange sculpted hills, and it likely gives up much of the fine dust that hazes the whole planet. It stands like a great sandcastle slowly smoothed by an outgoing tide. Grain by grain it surrenders itself to the air, feeding the red haze that drifts everywhere across this world. The little moon Phobos is scored all over with long parallel grooves. Run your eye across it, and you find shallow furrows crossing much of its surface, almost as though something had raked it. no one is fully sure how they came to be. Some think they mark the great blow that dug the moon's largest crater. Others that they trace the slow strain as Mars pulls the moon gradually closer. And still others that they are chains of pits pressed by rolling debris. Whatever their cause, they lie across the little world like the grain in a piece of weathered driftwood. Phobos wears its old scars quietly, circling on above the plains as it has for ages. The farther moon, Deimos, is so small that in the Martian sky it hangs like a bright star. It measures only about a dozen kilometers across, a lumpy scrap of dark rock, and from the ground below, it never grows into a proper disk you could study with the naked eye. It simply glimmers there, a steady point of light, rising and drifting across the night far more slowly than its restless sibling. It looks less like a moon than like a single patient lamp left burning at the edge of the dark. Small and quiet and easy to overlook, it keeps its distant, unhurried watch over the sleeping plains. Now and then, Phobos slips across the face of the sun. Because the moon is so small and so near, it cannot cover the sun the way our moon cannot draw that full curtain of shadow we know from a total eclipse at home. Instead, it appears as a dark, rounded shape sliding over the bright disk, dimming the day only a little as it hurries past. The rovers on the ground have looked up and watched it happen, again and again. It drifts across the light like a knot floating over a sunlit window. Then it has gone beyond the far horizon, and the pale day returns to its ordinary brightness. In places, Mars holds pale deposits of silica that whisper of warm water. Silica, the same stuff that makes up common quartz and opal, gathers where hot water and steam move through rock, dissolving and then leaving it behind, much as it does around the hot springs and steaming ground of volcanic country on Earth, where a rover's wheel once churned up a bright patch of it. It spoke of a place where heat and water met long ago. It rests there now, like the mineral crust left drying around an old spring. A gentle warmth once passed through this ground, and the stone kept the faintest record of its passing. Nearly all the air of Mars is a single, thin breath of carbon dioxide. Of every 100 parts of that atmosphere, about 95 are this one gas, with only small traces of nitrogen and argon, and a whisper of others mixed in. It is the same gas that freezes into the dry ice frosts of the poles and rises again as they warm, so the very air and the seasonal snows are made largely of the same thing. The whole sky is, in a sense, one long exhalation. It lies over the planet like a quiet, even breath that never fully leaves, thin and cold and steady above the resting ground. Along the edge of the old northern lowlands run faint lines that look like ancient shores, where the cratered highlands give way to the smooth plains below. Some see the marks of a vanished sea, level upon level, as if the water once stood at this height, and then that one before it drained or froze away. A few of the ridges may even be deposits heaped up by great waves, thrown across the shallows when something struck the standing ocean long ago. They trace the lowlands like the pale ring of salt a tide leaves drying on the sand. Whether sea or trick of the eye, they follow the land with the patient, level logic of water remembered. The wandering dust devils sometimes do the little rovers a quiet kindness. As these slow whirlwinds pass over a machine sitting on the plains, they can lift away the fine dust that has slowly dimmed its solar panels. And in a single afternoon, the rover drinks in a little more sunlight than it has in months, the same fine grit that would settle softly on your sleeve. Were you standing there in the cold, is swept up and carried off, and the small explorer wakes a touch brighter. It is like a passing hand brushing crumbs from a windowsill. No one arranged it, no one asked, yet the wind keeps offering these small mercies to the things left waiting on the ground. A long field of pale dunes curls in a great arc around the northern cap. Most of the sand on Mars is dark, ground down from volcanic rock, but here the dunes shine unusually bright, rich in gypsum, a soft, light-colored mineral that forms where water once touched and reworked the ground. So this ring of dunes is not only a record of the wind that piles it, but also a hint of moisture that shaped its grains long before. It lies around the ice like a second, paler band of snow that the summer never manages to melt. Bright sand and white frost keep their slow company there, circling the top of the world together. Here and there, a single boulder has left a track running down a slope. A rock, loosened by a faint quake or by frost letting go its grip, tumbles and bounces its way downhill, pressing a dotted, dimpled line into the soft dust as it goes. In the still, dry air of Mars, there is almost nothing to smooth such a trail away, so it may lie there, sharp and clear, for a very long time after the stone itself has finally come to rest. It marks the hillside like a line of footprints across fresh snow that no thaw ever comes to blur. One brief, quiet journey, recorded and then kept, long after the traveler has stopped. Now and then, a long white cloud streams from the peak of one of the old volcanoes. As the thin air is pushed up the great sloping flank of the mountain, it cools, and the little water it carries freezes into a faint veil of ice crystals, which the high wind then stretches out for hundreds of kilometers downwind. The same cloud can return with the season, day after day, always trailing from the same summit. It reaches out across the sky, like a slow banner unfurled from a quiet tower. There is no sound to it, no storm behind it, only cold air rising and the soft, repeated drawing of a single pale line. The little water that remains on Mars carries a heaviness that speaks of oceans lost. Among the atoms of hydrogen in that water, there is a heavier kind, and on Mars it is unusually common. The reason is gentle and slow. Over billions of years, the lighter hydrogen slipped away to space more easily than the heavy. So what stayed behind grew steadily richer in the heavier sort, like the last of a drink left long enough for the lightest part to fade. From that faint imbalance, we can tell that Mars once held far more water than it does today. It is the ring left drying at the bottom of an almost empty cup. The world is thirsty now, yet it still carries, in the weight of its water, the quiet ledger of all it once had. The whole surface of Mars holds about as much room as all the dry land on Earth. It seems a strange thing to say about a world only half our width, a planet you might picture as cramped and small. But remember that most of our own world lies hidden beneath the ocean, more than 2/3 of it drowned in water. Mars has no seas to cover it, so every crater, every dune, every long tired slope lies open to the sky, and all that bare ground gathered together comes out close to the size of our continents laid side by side. It is as if you took every shore and desert and mountain range on Earth and pressed them softly into a single quiet field. A small world, and yet a landscape as wide as everywhere we have ever walked. From the surface of Mars, the sun hangs noticeably smaller in the sky. If you stood there on a clear morning and looked up, you would still know it at once, still feel its pale warmth on your face, and yet it would seem a touch shrunken, a coin held a little farther away. That is simply because Mars circles at about half again the distance we do, so the sun shows only about 2/3 the width we are used to, and gives a little more than 1/3 of the light. It is like carrying a lamp from one room into the next, where it still glows but no longer fills the space. The same star we know, keeping the same slow watch, only gentler and more distant from that faraway ground. At the western end of the Great Canyon lies a tangled maze of valleys, where the enormous rift begins its long march across the planet. The ground does not open in a single clean cut, but frays into a web of crossing troughs and steep-sided blocks. This is a place whose name means the labyrinth of the night, and it earned it honestly. Long ago, the crust here was lifted and stretched over the broad swelling to the west, until it cracked along many lines at once, and whole slabs of ground sank down between the breaks. The result looks like the crackled glaze on a very old piece of pottery, fine lines running everywhere with no single path through. A quiet stone maze that no one built and no one needs to solve. Some clouds on Mars float almost at the very edge of space, high above the dust and the weather, far higher than any cloud we know at home. Faint wisps drift where the air has thinned to almost nothing. Up there, some 80 kilometers above the ground, the cold grows so deep that even carbon dioxide, the main gas of the Martian air, freezes onto tiny motes of dust and forms delicate crystals. These make the highest clouds seen anywhere in the solar system, shimmering with a faint pearl-colored light when the low sun catches them from below. They hang like the softest breath of mother of pearl against the dark. Even at the roof of the world, it seems, the sky still finds a way to make something lovely out of the cold. In the Martian evening, rays of light sometimes fan out through the clouds. It is a sight you would recognize in a heartbeat, the very same one you have watched on a hazy afternoon here, when the sun slips behind a bank of cloud and long spokes of brightness spill through every gap. A little rover once lifted its camera at dusk and caught exactly this. Beams of pale light reaching down through the thin, high clouds as the sun sank toward the rim of a crater. They spread across that alien sky like the slow spokes of a wheel turning somewhere just out of sight. A small, familiar kindness, waiting quietly on a world where no human eye had ever thought to look for it. Each winter, a strange gas quietly pools above the southern pole. As the long polar night settles in and the cold deepens beyond anything we know, the main air of Mars, its carbon dioxide, grows cold enough to freeze straight out of the sky and settle onto the ground as frost. But not everything freezes so easily. A lighter, rarer gas called argon stays stubbornly aloft, while the rest of the air thins away beneath it. And so, season after season, it gathers and grows richer over that frozen cap. It is like foam left behind at the edge of a slowly draining pool, drawn together as the water beneath it quietly disappears. An invisible tide, rising and falling with the year, that no one would ever feel or see. Scattered on the plains of Mars sit lumps of iron that once fell from space. As the little rovers wandered the sand, they came now and then upon dark, heavy stones that looked wrong somehow among the ordinary rubble, smooth and metallic, where everything else was dusty and rough. These are meteorites, pieces of iron and nickel that drifted in from the belt beyond and struck the ground long ago. In the thin Martian air, small stones like these can survive the fall better than they would on Earth. And once down, there is little to bury or wear them away. They rest there like dark anvils forgotten in the dust. Travelers from elsewhere come to lie among the stones of a world that was never their home. On the surface of Mars today, liquid water simply cannot linger. This is one of the quiet cruelties of the place, and it surprises people, because in some spots at midday, it grows warm enough that you might expect a puddle to form. But warmth is not the whole story. The air presses down so faintly there that water, if it appeared, would find itself pulled two ways at once, boiling and freezing almost in the same breath, either hissing away into vapor or hardening straight away into ice. A cup of water set on the ground would not sit and wait the way it does on your table. It would vanish like the fog of a breath the instant it meets a cold pane of glass. The world remembers water and holds its memory in the stone, yet can no longer let it rest upon the surface. A set of long young cracks stretches across a plain near the equator. Most of the great features of Mars are ancient beyond easy imagining, worn and softened by billions of years. But these fissures look fresh by comparison. Sharp lines torn open where the crust was pulled gently apart. A quiet lander that once sat listening to the ground traced many of the planet's small tremors back to this very place. When Mars shifts here, it is nothing like the shudder you might picture. It is a soft settling, a faint releasing of strain deep below, felt only by the most patient of instruments. Like the distant sigh of a house easing at night, it is the sound of a world quietly making itself comfortable in the dark. Some of the lava on Mars is so young that the planet may not yet be finished. Nearly all its great volcanoes have stood cold and silent for an unthinkable stretch of time, their fires long since banked and gone out. And yet, in one broad region, the frozen lava flows look startlingly recent, laid down perhaps only a few million years ago, which on a world this old is barely yesterday. That hints that somewhere beneath the surface, molten rock may still be stirring, slow and hidden. It rests down there like the last warmth in a hearth, long after the flames have died. Whether Mars still glows faintly alive within, no one yet knows for certain, and perhaps someone drifting towards sleep tonight will one day be the one to find out. Little by little, the sun itself keeps peeling the air away from Mars. With no true magnetic shield left wrapped around it, the planet lies open to the steady stream of particles that pours endlessly outward from the sun. A thin, restless wind blowing through all of space. When that wind reaches the top of the Martian air, it strikes the outermost atoms and knocks them free, sweeping them off into the dark a few at a time, on and on across the ages. A watchful orbiter has actually measured this quiet loss, ion by escaping ion. It is like steam lifting from a cup that no one ever drinks, thinning so slowly you would never catch it in the act. Grain by grain, the sky of a whole world is carried off into the night. The night air of Mars glows very faintly green. It is far too dim for any human eye to catch, but sharp instruments circling above have seen it clearly. A soft green light breathing out of the darkness over the poles. Through the day, sunlight breaks apart the carbon dioxide of the upper air into smaller pieces, setting loose lone atoms of oxygen. Through the long night, those atoms drift and wander until they meet and join again. And in that quiet reunion, they let go a little of their energy as this gentle glow. It is like the last color left in embers after the fire has settled to sleep. A world exhaling light it gathered from the sun, giving it back softly to the empty hours. The great northern lowlands of Mars are astonishingly flat. If you could walk out across them, you might go for a very long way and see almost no change at all, the ground stretching level and smooth to a hazy horizon in every direction. In truth, they are among the flattest, most even surfaces known anywhere in the solar system, far smoother than the crumpled highlands to the south. Many believe this is because water and sediment once filled the basin here, and later floods of lava spread across it, layer upon layer, ironing out the land beneath. It looks like a wide table someone wiped clean and left to rest. A great smooth floor, holding the shape of an ocean that drained away an age ago. Long, gentle ridges wrinkle across the Martian plains, like folds in a bedspread. They are low and soft-edged, rising only a little above the level ground, running for long distances in slow curves you would hardly notice from below. They formed as the planet slowly cooled and drew inward on itself, shrinking by the faintest amount, so that the crust had a touch too much surface for the world it wrapped. Something had to give, and the ground buckled up into these quiet rumples of stone. It is much like the wrinkled skin that forms on the top of milk as it cools in the pan. The marks of a whole planet growing older and settling, drawn tenderly across its face. Long ago, the whole planet may have slowly rolled to face a new direction. There is an immense swelling of volcanic rock on one side of Mars, a burden of stone so heavy it throws the balance of the entire world a little off. A weight like that does not want to sit far from the middle, and over unimaginable stretches of time, a spinning planet will gently rearrange itself so its heaviest part drifts toward the equator. So the outer shell of Mars is thought to have crept slowly around, tipping the old poles away to somewhere new. Picture a ball with a small lump of clay pressed onto its side, turning quietly in your hands until the weight comes to rest at its middle. A whole world patiently finding its balance. When Mars drifts farthest from the sun, a soft band of clouds gathers round its middle. The path it travels is more of an oval than a circle, so through the long year it swings nearer to the sun and then far away again. And near that far point, the whole planet cools by a noticeable measure. In that cooler season, what little water the air can hold begins to freeze into fine ice, and a broad belt of pale clouds forms above the equator, returning faithfully year after year. It settles across the middle of the world, like a loose white scarf laid gently over its shoulders, a slow, dependable weather, keeping its own patient calendar out in the dark. The dust of Mars is finer than almost anything you keep in your own home. Ground down and blown about for countless ages, its grains have been worn smaller and smaller, until the reddish powder that coats the whole planet is finer than flour, closer to talc than to sand. If you could take a pinch of it and rub it slowly between your fingers as you lie there, you would feel almost no grit at all, only a soft dryness, and it would cling to your skin like the faintest dusting of powder. It is that fineness that lets the wind lift it so high and carry it so far. A whole world wrapped in something as soft as the dust that settles quietly on a shelf. One day, the little moon Phobos may unravel into a ring around Mars. It circles very close to the planet already, closer than any other moon to its world. And with each slow turn, the gentle pull between them draws it a little nearer still. Far in the future, that same patient tug is expected to grow too strong for the small moon to bear. And rather than falling all at once, it will more likely come apart, its pieces spreading out along its path. There will be nothing sudden or frightening in it, only a slow loosening across many millions of years. Think of a bracelet quietly slipping into a scattering of loose beads. In time, Mars may wear a faint ring of its own, drawn from the moon it once held whole. Every so often, Mars and Earth drift close together in their long, slow laps around the sun. We each travel our own wide circle, but Earth rides the inner track and moves a little faster. So once in a while, it swings up alongside its neighbor and passes it by. That gentle catching up happens roughly every 26 months. And in those weeks, Mars hangs nearer to us than at any other time, glowing a little brighter, a little warmer in color in the evening sky. It's like two friends walking a great looping path, one on the inside curve slowly drawing level with the other. And then, just as quietly, we pull ahead again, and the distance between the two worlds begins to open once more. In those same weeks, Mars seems to pause among the stars and drift backward for a while. For as long as people have watched the night, they noticed that this one red light didn't hold still against the others, but wandered, and now and then reversed its course entirely. What's really happening is only a trick of our moving vantage point. As Earth overtakes Mars on the inner track, the more distant world appears to slide back, and trace a slow loop before going on its way. It's the same feeling as passing a slower car on an open road, when for a moment it seems to drift gently rearward beside you. A wandering that lives only in the seeing and settles the instant you understand it. The two little moons of Mars both circle almost exactly above its middle. Rather than looping over the poles or tilting at some odd slant, Phobos and Deimos travel in neat rings that lie nearly flat with the planet's equator, each keeping close to that same quiet plane. That tidy arrangement is part of why some believe they were born from a disk of rubble that once spun around the young Mars, gathering itself into moons the way cream gathers into butter. But others still read those same paths as captured wanderers, tamed long ago into gentle circles. No one yet knows for certain which story is true. Perhaps someone drifting towards sleep to a voice like this one will one day be the one who settles it. The farther moon, Deimos, moves so gently that it lingers a long while in the Martian sky, where its hurried little brother races over the heavens in a matter of hours. Deimos keeps almost in step with the turning of the planet beneath it, so it seems to rise in the east and cross the whole vault with the unhurried patience of something in no rush at all. From the ground, it would appear only as a small, steady point, brighter than the stars around it, holding its place through much of the long night, like a single lamp left burning far across a dark valley. A slow companion, keeping the sort of time that asks nothing of anyone. Out ahead of Mars, the wind from the sun piles up into a soft, curved edge. The sun is always breathing outward a thin stream of particles, and when that stream meets a planet, it has to part and flow around it, gathering first into a gentle boundary the shape of a bow. Because Mars carries no great magnetic shield of its own, this curved edge sits quite close to the planet, wrapping the daytime side like the water that swells and folds in front of a boat easing through a calm harbor. There's nothing sharp or stormy about it, only a slow parting and closing of something almost too thin to call a wind. A quiet shoulder the whole world leans into, out there in the dark. Beneath the famous red dust, the sand of Mars is dark and volcanic. The rusty powder that colors the whole planet is only the thinnest coating, a fine bloom lying over ground that is really quite different underneath. Where the wind sweeps that dust aside, or where the rovers have scuffed a wheel through it, the sand below shows through in deep grays and near blacks, made of the old cooled rock of ancient eruptions ground down into grains. It's a little like brushing your hand across a dusty windowsill and finding the dark wood beneath. So the red world is red only on the surface, and carries a quieter, darker color close against its skin. Seen up close, the stones of Mars wear far more colors than red alone. From far away, the planet reads as a single warm blush, but a traveler standing on the ground would find the palette opening up all around them. There are pale tans and dusty golds, cool grays where the wind has swept the surface bare, and here and there a faint greenish cast in certain minerals born of old water. The red is really just the dust, riding over rock that holds a whole muted range of tones, like a painting seen first from the far end of a room, then slowly, as you step nearer, giving up all its softer shades. A quiet reminder that a world holds more color the closer you lean in. For all their great height, the volcanoes of Mars rise so gently you might never feel the climb. These are not steep, jagged peaks, but broad, low domes, built up over ages by lava that flowed easily and spread far before it cooled, layer settling upon patient layer. Their slopes tilt at only the softest angle, so shallow that a walker crossing one might never sense they were on a mountain at all, only that the whole horizon leaned a little. You could wander uphill for the better part of a day and feel as though you'd strolled across a level plain. Vastness, it turns out, can hide itself completely inside a slope too gentle to notice. In the southern highlands lies another great basin called Argyre. Hidden among the old, cratered uplands is this wide, rounded hollow, a bowl gouged into the crust long ago by some enormous falling body in the planet's youth. Around its rim stand low, worn mountains, the softened remains of the ring that was thrown up when it formed, and its floor holds the faint traces of ice and old flowing water that gathered there across the ages. It sits in the landscape like a shallow dish pressed into clay and left to smooth over time. One more ancient scar, gone quiet and rounded, resting where it has always rested. The oldest ground still surviving on Mars lies across the southern highlands, while much of the northern half has been resurfaced and smoothed by later flows. The rugged uplands of the south have simply endured, keeping the deep pockmarks of a time when falling debris was far more common than it is now. To read that land is to look almost all the way back to the planet's beginning, at a surface that has changed very little in billions of years. It's like an old floor worn by countless footsteps that stopped passing long ago, holding its marks in perfect stillness. A face that has kept its earliest lines, patient and unhurried, through nearly the whole life of the world. Scientists read the age of Martian ground by counting the craters upon it. There's no calendar written into the rock, but there is this quiet arithmetic. since falling debris strikes a surface at a slow, fairly steady rate over the long ages. A land crowded with craters must have lain exposed for an enormous time, while a smoother, emptier plain must be younger, its old marks buried by later flows. So by tallying the little pits across a region, one can guess how long it has waited untouched. It's a bit like judging the age of a still pond by how many leaves have gathered on its surface. Time, counted gently, one soft impression at a time. The pull of Mars is not quite even across the whole world. Gravity there is a touch stronger over some places than others, tugged a little harder above the buried mass of the great volcanoes and the dense floors of old basins, and easing where the crust runs lighter and thinner. These are only the faintest differences, far too small to feel, but sensitive craft circling overhead drift ever so slightly as they pass above the heavier ground. It's like a boat riding over an unseen ridge on a riverbed, lifted by the smallest amount. The whole planet, in its quiet way, carries its hidden weight unevenly beneath a calm and dusty face. If you were resting there and let something slip from your hand, it would fall more slowly than you expect. The gentle pull of Mars is only a little over a third of the one that holds you to your bed tonight, so everything there sinks toward the ground in a softer, more unhurried way. A dropped stone would seem to hang and drift downward, taking its lazy time, landing without much of a sound. A tossed handful of that fine dust would rise higher and settle back more slowly than it ever could at home. Imagine a feather easing down through still air, only it's a pebble behaving that way. Even falling on Mars is a slow and gentle thing. The seasons of Mars are not evenly matched in length. Because the planet travels an oval path rather than a perfect circle, it moves faster when it swings near the sun and slower when it drifts far away. And that uneven pace stretches some seasons long and squeezes others short. One hemisphere gets a brief, warmer summer and a long, cool winter, while the other lives the opposite, its summer drawn out and mild, its winter passing more quickly. It's a little like a year where autumn lingers for months and spring is gone before you've noticed it. A calendar kept not by even steps, but by the slow and quickening drift of a whole world around its star. Long ago, some watchers believed they saw the dark markings of Mars spread and fade with the seasons. Through the small telescopes of an earlier time, the shadowy patches on the planet seemed to deepen and grow as the warmer months came round, then pale again with the cold. And more than a few dreamed this might be the breathing of living things, greening and withering across the year. We understand now that it's the wind at work, sweeping bright dust across dark ground and then uncovering it again, shifting the shades of the surface season by season. A gentler answer than the old hope, though the old hope was a lovely thing to hold. And still the markings come and go, faithful to a rhythm all their own. Much of Mars has scarcely changed in billions of years. Without the restless drifting crust and the endless weathering rains that reshape our own world, great stretches of the Martian surface have simply stayed as they were, holding the same craters, the same channels, the same old slopes across almost unimaginable spans of time. What we look upon now is very close to what stood there when life on Earth was no more than the faintest stirring in a warm sea. It's like walking into a quiet room untouched for a lifetime, where every object rests exactly where it was left. A world that has kept remarkably still. while ours turned over and over beneath our feet. When we watch Mars from here, we're always watching a few minutes into its past. Even light, the swiftest thing there is, needs time to cross the great gulf between the two worlds. And when Mars is near, that crossing still takes several minutes, and many more when it drifts far. So a signal sent from a little rover on that dusty ground arrives at our waiting ears already a touch aged, carrying news of a moment that has quietly passed. It's like starlight that set out long before you looked up to catch it. Every glimpse we have of that red world is a soft and gentle memory, reaching us from a little while ago. So the two worlds go on turning, near and then far, tethered only by that thin thread of light that takes its patient minutes to cross between them. Mars keeps its slow seasons and its uneven years, its dark sand beneath the red, its old ground lying still through the ages, indifferent and calm whether anyone is watching or not. And we drift alongside on the inner track, catching up and falling behind, catching up again. Two quiet travelers on their own wide, unhurried circles, keeping company across the dark without ever needing to touch. Three great volcanoes stand together in a long, quiet row across the Martian highlands. Not far from the tallest peak of all, the ground lifts again into a broad swelling, and along its crest rise three more mountains, spaced out almost evenly, as if set down by a careful hand. They were built the same slow way, each one fed by the same deep warmth rising through the crust, swelling higher with every patient outpouring across untold ages. They line the horizon like three old watchfires laid along a ridge, cold now, but still keeping their places. And there they hold, shoulder to shoulder, in a stillness that has lasted longer than any story we could tell. On the far side of the planet lies a second country of volcanoes, gentler and less grand. This region, called Elysium, is the only other place on Mars where the ground rose in this fiery way, gathering into a small family of broad domes upon a low rise. Beneath it, long ago, heat pushed upward and lifted the crust, and the mountains grew where the rock gave way and let the warmth spill through. It sits apart from the great volcanic highlands, like a small hearth in a distant room, tended by the same hidden fire. Two quiet corners of one world, each remembering the days when Mars still burned within. At the summit of each of these great mountains waits a ring of sunken hollows. These are the calderas, the wide pits left behind when the molten rock beneath a volcano slowly drained away and the roof above it settled down into the empty space. Sometimes one hollow sits within another, and another within that, each marking a season of the mountain's long life. They rest at the very top, like footprints pressed softly one inside the next, a record of the ground breathing out and sinking back. Nothing stirs there now, only the shadows moving slowly across the rims as the small sun crosses overhead. A third great basin opens across the Martian surface, gentler in its shape than the others. It is called Isidis, a broad and nearly round lowland scooped out long ago by a falling world, then smoothed over the ages by lava creeping in and dust drifting down to soften every edge. Its floor lies flat and calm, a wide plain ringed by the worn remains of its old walls. It rests upon the face of Mars like a shallow bowl left out in the open, slowly filling with the fine, quiet sediment of time. And around its edges, the land climbs away, keeping the memory of the blow that shaped it, long since gone gentle. The two little moons of Mars are darker than almost anything near them. They drink in the sunlight rather than throwing it back. Their surface is blacker than coal, closer in color to the old, carbon-rich stones that wander the belt of rubble farther out from the sun. It's part of why some believe these moons were once such wanderers, caught and kept by the pull of the planet. They circle Mars like two small cinders, faint and unshining, easy to overlook against the deep of the sky. Yet there they stay, faithful, tracing their little rings around a world that holds them close. On the larger moon, there sits a crater almost too big for the little world that carries it. It is called Stickney, and it spans a great share of the whole moon's width, the mark of a blow that came near to breaking the small body apart. But the moon held together, cracked and scarred yet whole, and it carries that vast round scar to this day, a hollow wide enough to swallow much of its own face. It rides across the Martian sky, wearing that single great dent, like an old wound, long since healed over. A reminder that even the smallest travelers carry the story of the day they were nearly undone. The smaller moon wears its crater softly, half hidden beneath a covering of dust. Where the larger moon looks battered and grooved, this one seems smoothed and gentled, its hollows filled in and rounded off by a loose blanket of fine powder. Over the long ages, small impacts have ground its surface to a soft regolith, a layer of broken grains that drifts back down and settles into every dip and pit. It looks less like a shattered rock and more like a stone worn round in a slow current, softened at every corner. And so it turns, quiet and dim, the calmer of the two small companions of Mars. In the cold hour just before dawn, fog gathers in the deepest Martian valleys. When the long night has chilled, the still air pooled at the bottom of the great canyons, the little moisture it holds begins to condense, and a thin white mist settles low along the floor. If you were to wake there at first light and look down into that vast rift in the ground, you might see the fog lying quietly below you, pale and soft, waiting for the sun. It would drift there like the morning haze over a river valley at home, patient in the shadow. And as the light climbed the far wall, it would slowly thin and lift, and the day would take it gently back. The two polar caps of Mars are not made of the same frozen stuff. In the north, when the warmer season comes, what remains behind is mostly water ice, a pale cap that holds through the summer. In the south, a lid of frozen carbon dioxide lingers even through its warmest days, a covering of what we might call dry ice that never fully departs. So the planet keeps two different kinds of cold at its two ends, one built of frozen water, the other of frozen air. It's a quiet asymmetry, two white crowns of unlike making, each faithful to its own patient rhythm through the year. Even on its calmest days, the sky of Mars is never entirely clear. The thin air almost always carries a fine suspension of dust, particles so light and so slow to settle that they hang aloft for weeks, softening the sun and coloring the whole dome overhead. In such feeble gravity and such faint air, what rises hardly wants to come back down. It leaves the daytime sky with a permanent, gentle haze, like the far distance on a warm afternoon when the horizon turns to milk. A world seen always through a soft, dusty veil, its light forever a little diffused. After the sun goes down on Mars, the light is slow to leave. That same fine dust, hanging high above the surface, catches the last of the sunlight long after the sun itself has dropped below the edge of the world, and it scatters that light back down as a lingering glow, so the twilight stretches on, the sky holding its color well into the evening, unwilling to give the darkness its full turn. It's like the long, slow dusk of a midsummer evening that seems in no hurry to end. And in that patient afterglow, the plains keep a faint light about them for a good while after the day is done. On Mars, the horizon curves away sooner than it does here at home, because the planet is the smaller world. Its surface bends more sharply beneath your feet, and the edge of what you can see draws in closer all around you. Stand upon a level plain there, and the ground would fall away into distance nearer than your eye expects, the whole visible world gathered into a tighter ring. It would feel a little like standing on a low hill that curves gently down on every side, the far country always just out of view. A small world holds its horizons close, keeping its distances modest and near. Scattered across the Martian ground lie stones carved to smooth, sharp faces by the wind. Where the wind has blown steadily for ages, carrying its fine grains low along the surface, it has slowly ground and polished the exposed rocks, cutting them into flat facets and clean edges. Turn one over, and you might find several smoothed sides meeting at crisp lines, each one filed down by countless passing grains of sand. They look for all the world like pebbles shaped by a flowing river, though the only river here was the moving air, patient work, done over spans of time we can barely hold in the mind. Each winter, a broad hood of cloud settles over the northern pole, as that end of the planet tips away from the sun and sinks into the long polar night. The cold gathers water and dust into a wide veil of haze that spreads across the whole cap and the lands around it. Beneath that pale hood, hidden from the low light, the pole quietly deepens into its season of frost. It draws the veil over itself like a sleeper pulling a blanket up against the cold, and there it rests through the dark months, wrapped and still, until the returning sun slowly lifts the covering away. From the surface of Mars, our own Earth would hang in the sky as a small blue evening star. Look toward the west after sunset from those dusty plains, and among the scattered points of light, you would find one steady and faintly blue. The world you came from, reduced to a single quiet spark. It would rise and set as the other stars do, a small, bright companion, low above the horizon, easy to miss if you didn't know to look. It would shine there like a far lantern in a distant window, calm and unblinking. And somewhere beneath that little blue light, everyone you have ever known would be going quietly about their evening. The night on Mars is lit only faintly by its two small moons. Neither is large enough to pour real moonlight across the ground the way our own moon floods our nights with silver. The nearer one hurries by as a modest glowing shape, the farther one no more than a bright star. And between them, they lend the darkness only the gentlest touch of light. The Martian night stays deep and soft, lit less by its little moons than by the crowd of quiet stars above. It's a darkness made for resting in, unhurried and dim, watched over by two small companions that ask for nothing. The ground of Mars stays loose and soft, for no rain ever came to pack it down. Here on Earth, water settles the soil, binds the grains, presses the dust into firmer ground beneath our steps. But across most of Mars, the fine, loose material has simply gathered and lain undisturbed, drifting and settling without ever being pressed together by falling rain. so the surface holds a powdery softness, a loose blanket of fine grains resting lightly upon the harder rock below. It waits there, unsettled and quiet, keeping the gentle looseness of a thing that time has touched, but weather never truly firmed. Now and then, a shooting star slips quietly across the Martian night. Mars, like our own world, wanders through the faint trails of dust left behind by passing comets. And when those small grains meet the top of its thin air, they flare and vanish in a single thread of light. But the comets that cross its path are not the ones we know, so the little showers that fall on Mars follow their own old calendar, unfamiliar and slow. A stray grain, no larger than a seed, burns itself away in one silent streak, like a match struck once and let go. Somewhere above those cold plains, the sky is gently sweeping itself clean. Every so often, a fresh crater opens on the face of Mars. A small stone falls out of the dark, strikes the ground, and leaves a new scar where a moment before there was none. Because the air is so thin, more of these little stones survive the fall than would ever reach the ground at home. And the cameras circling overhead have watched new pits appear from one year to the next. Here and there, such a strike punches down through the dust and uncovers bright ice hidden just below, a sudden pale mark against the rust. In time, the wind softens the edges and the ground grows quiet again. On Mars, the wind has finally been heard. For most of our history, the planet was a silent picture, a place we could only gaze at from far away. But the small machines resting on its surface now carry ears as well as eyes. They have caught the low push of the Martian breeze moving past them, a faint and airy hush, thinned almost to nothing by the sparse air it travels through. It is a small, dry sigh of a sound, softer than any wind you have ever felt against your own window at night. After all the long silence, Mars turned out to have a voice after all, quiet as it is. On the surface of Mars, a small device has made breathable air. The thin blanket of gas there is almost all carbon dioxide, the kind of air no lungs of ours could ever use. And yet a little machine riding aboard one of the rovers learned to pull that gas gently apart. From it, patiently, it drew out pure oxygen, the very thing a person would need to take a single breath on that far world. It worked in small sips, the way a seedling gives off its first faint trace of air. Only a spoonful of breath, made on another planet, and yet the first of its kind. In the old mud of Mars, the rovers have found the stuff of carbon. Deep in stone that was once the floor of a quiet lake, they turned up molecules built around carbon, the same patient element that forms the framework of every living thing at home. This does not mean life was ever there, for such molecules can gather without it, drifting together in warm water and settling slowly into the mud. Still, they are the ingredients, the raw grammar from which living things are written. They had waited in the rock for billions of years, holding their small secret in the dark. The whole shape of Mars has been measured from above. An instrument circling the planet sent down a thread of laser light, again and again, timing how long each faint pulse took to return. And from those countless little measurements, it built a map of every rise and hollow on the surface. From that patient counting, we came to know exactly how the great volcanoes swell and how deep the vast basins sink. It traced the planet the way a hand might read a face in the dark, gently, point by point. Mars, once only a smudge of red, became a landscape we could hold in the mind. Some of the stones of Mars hold a quiet green. Scattered through the dark volcanic rock lie small crystals of a mineral called olivine, the same pale green grain you might find in certain sands here on Earth. It forms deep within molten rock and lingers only where water has not yet had the chance to soften it away. So its presence speaks of dryness and of stone left largely untouched. In the low light, it lends the rust a faint, cool undertone, like moss caught in old iron. A whisper of another color, resting in a world we have always called red. The loose soil of Mars might one day be pressed into brick. That fine red dust and grit, packed and bound together, holds enough strength that it could be shaped into solid blocks with only heat or a little pressure. Some who dream of far-off days imagine shelters raised from the ground itself, walls made of the very plane they stand upon, without a single beam carried across the dark from home. It is a gentle thought, a house grown quietly from its own doorstep. For now the dust lies loose and waiting, as it has for ages, asking nothing of anyone. Without its old shield, Mars lies open to the light of space. Long ago, the planet lost the magnetic wrapping that once turned such rays aside, and the air that remains is far too thin to finish the task alone. So more of the sun's fine, invisible radiation drifts down to the surface than ever reaches us here, settling softly over the ground through the long, slow day. There is nothing sudden in it, nothing storming, only a steady and patient shine passing through the quiet. The land simply receives it, as it has received everything else, without complaint. Beneath the smooth northern plains may lie the last of an ancient sea. Where water once seems to have spread across the low half of the world, the cold could have drawn it down and locked it away, leaving not a shore, but a buried stillness of ice folded into the soil. Some of the flat, featureless ground up there behaves as though something frozen rests just below it. If so, then the old ocean never truly left, only laid down and grew quiet under a blanket of dust. It sleeps there yet, a sea turned to stone and shadow, keeping the shape of the land above it. The tracks left by the rovers slowly disappear. As each small machine rolls across the plains, it presses two faint lines into the soft ground behind it, a thin trail marking where it has been. But the wind never rests for long, and grain by grain it lifts the loose dust and lets it settle again, until the lines soften and blur and finally close over. In a few seasons, the ground forgets that anything passed at all. The plain returns to itself, smooth and unmarked, as though the little traveler had never come. High over Mars, thin clouds sometimes glow after dark, when the sun has already dropped below the horizon and the ground has fallen into shadow. A few faint veils drifting far above still catch its light and hold it a little longer. Made of fine ice, they shine softly against the deepening sky, lit from beneath by a sun the land can no longer see. They are the last pale embers of the day, floating where the air grows too thin to call itself sky. Then they too dim, and the dark settles evenly over everything. Far down inside, Mars still keeps a little warmth. The heat left over from its making, and the slow glow of certain minerals deep within has never entirely drained away, so the interior remains gently warm even now. That warmth rises through the rock with unimaginable slowness, feeding the last faint stirrings the planet has left. It is a small inner hearth, banked low, dimmer than it was in the young days, but not yet gone out. A world cooling by patient degrees across the ages. The crust of Mars is thicker than our own. The stone shell that wraps the planet runs deeper below the surface than the thin skin that carries our own continents and seas. Part of this is because Mars grew still inside so long ago, its outer rock no longer broken and remade the way ours forever is. So the crust simply thickened and settled in place. It sits now like a heavy quilt, drawn close over the sleeping stone. Solid, unbroken, keeping the deep interior sheltered within. On Mars, a day has a name of its own. Because the planet turns in a rhythm so close to ours, and yet not quite the same, those who follow the little rovers came to call each Martian day a sol, to keep it apart from the days we count at home. The sols gather into long Martian seasons, and the seasons into a year near twice the length of ours, all of it keeping a slow and separate time. It is a calendar written by another world's turning, a quiet clock ticking to a rhythm all its own. On the floor of an old crater, small tubes of rock lie waiting. One of the rovers has been gathering pieces of Martian stone and dust, sealing each one carefully away, and setting them down in tidy caches upon the ground. There they rest, sheltered and still, held for a day when some later craft might come to carry them across the dark and home to Earth. It is a message left for the future, written not in words, but in stone, a small gift, set out patiently, trusting that someone will one day come for it. The dust of Mars is faintly magnetic. Some of the rovers carried small magnets upon their frames, and before long a fine coating of red grains had gathered there, clinging softly where nothing else would. Within that dust lie tiny specks of iron-rich mineral, born of old volcanic fire, each one a minute grain that a magnet can quietly call to itself. So the whole planet is lightly dusted with these little metal seeds, spread evenly through its soil. It is as though Mars remembers, in every handful of its ground, the fire from which it once was made. Through the long cold nights, some rovers are kept warm from within. The dark hours on Mars fall far below anything we would call freezing, cold enough to still a machine entirely. And so the larger rovers carry a small, steady source of heat at their core. A little warmth, drawn from a gently fading element, keeps their inner parts from seizing in the cold and lets them wake again with the sun. It glows quietly on through every night, asking nothing, giving only heat. A quiet warmth held close, seeing the small traveler safely through to morning. The eyes we sent to Mars can see more than our own. The cameras riding on the rovers and the orbiters are able to catch light our eyes would miss, shades of the near invisible that lie just past red. And by reading them, they can tell one mineral from another across a whole distant hillside. In those hidden colors, a plain that looks evenly rust to us breaks open into patches and bands, each stone quietly announcing what it is made of. It is a way of seeing the planet dressed in colors we were never given. And through those borrowed eyes, Mars grows richer the longer we look. On the dunes of Mars, the wind writes ripples of two different sizes. Across the sand lie the small, close ridges we would know from any beach at home, and running among them a second set, far larger and more widely spaced, a kind seldom seen on Earth. The thin air and the gentle gravity let the wind arrange the grains in this second, grander rhythm, one our own thicker air never quite allows. Together they lay a delicate pattern over the dunes, ripples within ripples, fine lines crossed by broad ones. The whole surface softly combed by a wind we cannot feel. The drifting dust of Mars gathers quietly in the low places. Wherever the ground dips, into a crater floor, behind a ridge, down in the lee of a boulder, the wind lets its load settle and rest, filling the hollows with soft, deep drifts. Over ages, these sheltered pockets grow thick and smooth, the finest grains sinking down out of the moving air into stillness. They are the calm eddies of a slow red current, the places where the wandering dust finally lies down. And there it stays, undisturbed, until some rarer gust comes to lift it on again. Behind Mars stretches a long cone of its own shadow. As the planet stands in the sunlight, it casts darkness out the other way, a great tapering funnel of night reaching far into the space behind it. Anything that drifts into that cone, a passing moon, a grain of loose dust, falls for a while out of the sun and it into the planet's shade. The little moons slip through it on their rounds, dimming and then brightening as they go. It is the shape of nightfall itself, drawn out across the emptiness, quietly following the world wherever it moves. On Mars today, the wind alone shapes the land. The rivers dried and stilled long ago, the great fires of the volcanoes cooled, and the ice moves far too slowly to see, so it falls to the moving air to do the patient work of carving. Grain against stone, breath after breath, it wears the rock and heaps the sand and smooths the plains. The one restless hand still at work upon a quiet world. Everything you find there now is, in some measure, the wind's slow craft, a whole planet gently sculpted by nothing heavier than air. On Mars, the stars at night shine in the very same patterns we know. Mars is our near neighbor, and though it lies far off, it is not far enough to rearrange the heavens. The shapes we trace on a clear night at home would hang there almost unchanged. The same figures, the same familiar company gathered overhead. Only the two little moons crossing above would tell you that you had wandered somewhere new. It is as though the whole night sky had come along for the journey. The stars, at least, are something the two worlds still quietly share. Across the Martian night stretches the same soft river of the Milky Way. The pale band we sometimes glimpse on the darkest nights at home is our own galaxy seen edge on, the massed glow of countless distant suns. From Mars, that same band would arch high overhead, dimmed only a little by the thin dust in the air. There are no city lights there to wash it away, no glow along the horizon to drown it out. It would pour across the sky like milk spilled and left to settle. A gentle reminder that both worlds ride together inside one great turning wheel of stars. The far stars burn steadier in the Martian sky than they do in ours. Here, their light must cross a deep and restless ocean of air, and every ripple in it makes the stars seem to tremble and wink. The air of Mars is only a faint breath by comparison, so it stirs the passing light far less. The stars there hold more still, shining with a calm, unwavering glow. They rest in the dark, like distant lamps that no wind can reach. There's a certain peace in a sky whose stars do not flicker. The little rovers of Mars have often lived far longer than anyone promised them. When each was sent, it was given only a modest span of days it was expected to survive, a careful and cautious guess. Yet many went on working long past that, rolling and watching for years, some for more than a decade. while the seasons slowly turned around them. They kept waking each morning to the returning sun, faithful well beyond all reasonable hope, like an old traveler who simply refuses to stop walking. There is something quietly moving in a machine that outlasts every expectation set upon it. Over the long ages, the craters of Mars slowly lose their sharp edges. A fresh crater is a clean bowl with a crisp rim, its walls steep and its floor still bare. But time is patient, and the wind, the settling dust, and the endless small tremors all work upon it, wearing the rim low and filling the hollow in. The oldest craters have grown soft and shallow, worn nearly smooth, mere ghosts of the pits they once were. Like footprints in wet sand that the tide keeps gently smoothing away. Even a scar, given time enough, can be quietly worn back toward calm. In the heart of many Martian craters rises a small central hill. When something strikes the ground hard enough, the rock beneath does a strange and lovely thing. For an instant, it behaves almost like water, splashing upward at the middle and then freezing in place before it can fall, leaving a peak standing at the very center of the bowl. So the crater keeps a little mountain of its own, held aloft long after the blow that shaped it, like the single drop that leaps back up from the surface of a still pond. A brief moment of long ago, now settled forever into stone. Every place on Mars carries a name, drawn from many languages and old maps. The great features were named long ago by watchers peering through their telescopes, who borrowed words from ancient stories and far-off lands. The smaller craters were later given the names of towns from all across the Earth, quiet places chosen to be remembered on another world. So the map of Mars became a soft echo of our own, scattered with names we carried out to it. Like a foreign shore where every little cove has been called after somewhere back home. A whole planet gently labeled in the words we brought along. A single small crater marks the beginning of every Martian map. On Earth, we count our longitudes from a line drawn through a town in England, an agreed starting place, and nothing more. Mars needed such a starting line too, and so a small crater near its middle was chosen to stand for 0, the point from which all the rest is measured. It is an ordinary little pit, no grander than its neighbors, and yet the whole grid of the planet hangs quietly from it, like the first stitch from which a wide blanket is slowly knitted. A modest anchor holding steady while the maps spread out on every side. At midday on Mars, the sunlight falls a little paler than the light you know. Mars stands farther from the sun than we do, and so it gathers less than half the warmth and brightness that reaches the Earth. The day there is still clear enough to see by, still plainly daytime, only softer, as though the sun had been turned down a touch. If you stood there at noon, the light around you would feel much like a mild and cloudy afternoon at home, like a lamp glimpsed through a thin white curtain, a gentler daylight for a world that keeps its distance. Mars has no large moon to lift its seas, and so it keeps no tides. Our own moon is big and near, and its steady pull draws the oceans up and lets them fall, breathing along every shore twice each day. The 2 moons of Mars are tiny, little more than drifting stones, and their pull is far too faint to move much of anything at all. Even when Mars still held its ancient waters, they would have lain almost perfectly calm, like a bowl of water carried by someone walking very softly, a world whose seas, while they lasted, kept remarkably still. The craters of Mars lie nested, small within large, across the whole face of the world. For ages beyond counting, the sky has let its stones fall, and each has left its mark, until the older ground grew crowded with overlapping rings. Newer craters open inside the floors of ancient ones, and smaller ones inside those again, layer upon layer of soft pockmarks. To read them is almost to read time itself, the freshest always resting atop the oldest, like ripples crossing older ripples on the surface of a pond. A long and patient record, written in circles upon circles. Over nearly all of Mars, a deep and patient silence holds. There are no birds there, no rustling leaves, no voices, no engines, save the few small ones we have sent. The air is so thin that even the wind, when it blows, can manage only a faint and far-off sigh. For the most part, the whole planet simply rests in a stillness older than any of us can quite imagine. Like a great empty room where a single clock ticks somewhere far away. It is a quiet so complete that it seems almost to carry a weight of its own. The people who study Mars give small, friendly names to its stones. As the rovers roll along, they pass rocks and ridges that need to be spoken of, and so each is quietly christened, sometimes after a place, sometimes after a passing fancy. A plain boulder is handed some homely, easy name, and all at once it is no longer merely a rock, but a landmark, a companion along the road. It is a way of making a strange world feel a little more familiar, like naming the hills you pass on a long and lonely walk. Even so far away, we cannot help but befriend the ground beneath the wheels. A fine film of dust rests upon nearly every stone of Mars. The air there is forever carrying a little of the reddish powder, and wherever it slows, the dust drifts softly down and settles over whatever it finds. Rocks that were once dark are dressed in a pale, rusty veil, their true colors hidden away beneath it. Now and then, a gust or a passing whirl lifts that coating off, and for a while, the stone shows its real face once more. Like furniture left under white sheets in a shuttered, sleeping house, the whole planet wears a thin, soft cloak of its own slow making. Mars looks out toward a different corner of the sky than we do. Because it leans upon its axis at its own particular angle, its north points not toward our familiar pole star, but toward another quarter of the heavens entirely. A traveler standing there would find no single bright lamp marking true north, only a dim and unremarkable stretch of stars. And in time, as the long ages turn, even that heading will slowly wander away, like a compass that answers to a different, quieter magnet. Even the still point of the sky is not the same upon every world. Near the ground of Mars, the air changes temperature quickly with height. The thin air holds its heat poorly and mixes it slowly, so warmth does not spread the way it does down here at home. On a sunny day, the soil at the surface can be far warmer than the air, just a knee's height above it. A person standing there might feel a real chill about the head while the ground underfoot lies almost mild. Like wading into cool water that grows warmer the deeper you reach. The world keeps its little warmth held close, near the stones that gather and hold it. Each Martian morning arrives slowly and without a sound. Long before the sun clears the horizon, the sky begins to pale, and the deep cold of the night starts, very gradually, to loosen its grip. The frost that gathered in the darkness begins to thin, and the first low light stretches long, soft shadows across the plains. Nothing hurries any of it along. The day simply seeps in, quietly filling the world from the edges, like water rising gently into a wide, shallow pool. And so another Martian day begins, as softly as the last one drew to its close. Over a whole Martian year, the sun traces a slow, patient teardrop in the sky. If you could stand in one spot and mark where it hung at the very same hour, day after day, and join those marks together, they would not make a circle or a line, but a single, graceful loop, drawn out to a soft point at one end. It comes from the tilt of the world, and the long, uneven way Mars leans toward and away from the sun across its seasons. Like a slow pen that never quite lifts from the page, returning near where it began, but never exactly. It is a shape the sky draws only for those who wait a whole year to see it. The shadows on Mars fall sharp and clean. Here at home, the air is thick enough to scatter light around every edge, softening the darkness beneath things into something gentle and gray. But the thin air of Mars carries far less of that scattered glow, so a shadow keeps its outline crisp and dark, right up to the very rim. A rock lays down a shadow with edges you could almost trace with a fingertip, like ink poured onto pale paper, holding its shape without bleeding outward. There is a quiet clarity to it, a starkness that feels older and stiller than any shade we know. The sun that warms Mars is fainter than the one we know. Mars wanders far out from the fire at the center of things, and by the time the light has crossed all that distance, less than half the warmth we feel at home is left to fall upon it. Noon, there is not the bright, pressing heat of a summer afternoon, but something softer and thinner, more like the muted light of an overcast day. A traveler could still read by it easily, still see the whole plain laid out clear, like a lamp turned gently down, but never out. The day is bright enough, only quieter in its brightness, as though the sun itself were speaking more softly. Around the Martian sun, a pale ring can sometimes hang. High in the cold air, thin veils of ice crystals drift, each tiny grain no more than a fleck of frozen water. When the sunlight passes through them just so, it bends and gathers into a faint circle of light, a halo standing quietly around the sun. The rovers have looked up and caught it there, a soft ring in a dusty sky, like the gentle glow that gathers around a street lamp on a misty night. It is the same trick of light we sometimes see on winter mornings here, carried out on a colder, farther world. At the poles of Mars, the night can last for months. Because the world leans on its axis much as ours does, its far north and far south each turn away from the sun for a long, unbroken stretch of the year. Through all those weeks, the sun never rises at all, and a deep, still darkness settles over the ice and holds there, patient and complete. The cold deepens, the frost thickens, and nothing stirs to break it. Like a single long evening that forgets, for a season, how to become morning. It is a stillness measured not in hours, but in whole slow turnings of the world. And then, in its own time, that same pole turns to face months of unbroken day. When the season swings around, the sun climbs above the horizon and simply refuses to leave. Round and round it wheels, low and slow, never quite setting, circling the edge of the sky like something reluctant to say goodnight. The frost begins to lift, the long dark loosens, and the light stays on and on, like a candle left burning in a window through the whole of a summer. It is a strange and gentle sort of day, one that lasts not from dawn to dusk, but from one season nearly to the next. Distant hills on Mars fade softly into haze. The air always carries a little of the fine red dust, and though it is thin, it is enough that far-off things lose their sharpness and dissolve into a pale, dusty blur. A ridge close by stands clear and firm, while the same kind of ridge miles away seems to melt into the color of the sky. It gives the land a sense of depth, of near and far, of quiet distance opening out on every side. Like the way faraway mountains here go blue and dim on a warm afternoon, and so even a barren plain gains a kind of softness, its farthest edges gently smudged away. Sometimes the layered air lifts a far ridge into a mirage. Near the ground, the warm and cold layers of Martian air can stack unevenly, and where they meet, the light passing through them bends. A distant slope may seem to float a little above the horizon, or shimmer and stretch as though seen through moving water. It is only the air playing its slow games with the light, like the wavering pool that seems to lie across a warm road ahead, always retreating as you near it. Even on a world so still and so dry, the light finds small ways to shimmer and deceive. The seasons of Mars arrive with almost nothing to mark them. There are no leaves here to turn gold and fall, no birds gathering to leave, no first green pushing up through the soil. A season on Mars is only a slow shift of frost and light, the caps swelling white and then thinning again, the shadows leaning to a new angle, the air growing a touch heavier or thinner as the ice comes and goes. Like a room where nothing moves except the light crossing slowly from one wall to another. The year still turns, faithfully, only its turning is written in cold and shadow rather than in living things. The changing ice caps were among the first things we ever saw of Mars. Long before any craft crossed the dark to reach it, watchers here bent over their telescopes and noticed the white patches at its poles grow and shrink as the Martian seasons passed. It was one of the earliest signs that this was a living, changing world and not merely a still red point of light. Like watching a distant candle flicker and knowing by that alone that a hand must be near it. Those slow breathing caps were our first quiet conversation with another world, carried out across the whole width of the sky. Clouds on Mars cast slow, traveling shadows on the ground. When thin wisps of ice cloud drift high overhead, they dim the pale sunlight a little as they pass, and their soft shadows creep across the plains below. From above, you can watch these faint gray patches wander over the land, unhurried, following the high wind, like the shade of a single cloud sliding across a wide, empty field on a summer day. It is a small thing, easy to miss, and yet it means the sky of Mars is never quite empty, never entirely still. The dust of Mars softens every edge it touches, settling over everything, thin and even. It rounds the sharp corners of stones, mutes the boldest colors into gentler ones, and lays a quiet sameness over the whole scene. What might have been jagged and harsh becomes worn and mild beneath that patient coating. Like snow that falls through a long night and smooths a rough garden into soft white curves by morning. The world underneath is hard and old, but the dust lends it a tenderness, a hush, as though everything had been gently tucked in. If you stood on Mars, even a gale would brush against you like a breath. The air is so thin there that its winds, however fast they race across the plains, carry almost no weight or force. A storm that might tear at you here would meet your hand as the faintest, softest push, hardly more than the stir of someone passing by in a quiet room. Like the gentle current of air from a slowly opening door. It is one of the strangest gifts of that thin sky, that its fiercest wind would feel against your skin, almost like nothing at all. After the sun goes down, the warmth of the Martian day slips quickly away. The thin air holds so little heat that once the light is gone, whatever warmth the ground gathered through the day begins at once to drain up into the dark. Within a short while, the mild afternoon has given way to a deep and settling cold. There is no lingering warmth in the air to soften the change. Like a stone that felt warm in your palm at noon and turns cool the moment the sun leaves it. The night comes in cold and clean, taking back the day's small heat almost as soon as it is offered. The little rovers keep the sun's own time. They wake as the light returns, and their panels begin to drink it in, and they settle into rest as the dark comes down and the cold deepens. Their days are shaped not by any distant clock, but by the slow rise and fall of the Martian sun, working while it shines and holding still while it is gone. Like a traveler in an old house who rises and sleeps by the light in the windows, having lost all need of a watch. There is something restful in it, a machine living quietly by the same rhythm the whole world keeps. Through the year, the noon sun climbs and sinks in the Martian sky. Because Mars leans on its axis, the height the sun reaches at midday drifts slowly with the seasons, riding higher in one part of the year and lower in another. A shadow cast at noon grows long, then short, then long again, marking the slow passage of the Martian months. Like the way the winter sun here hangs low and pale, then lifts and strengthens as summer comes on. And so even the middle of the day carries a quiet reminder that the seasons are always turning, patiently, overhead. Far in the future, an aging sun may warm Mars a little. In time, over ages almost too long to hold in the mind, our sun will slowly swirl and shine more warmly, and its gentle heat will reach farther out into the dark than it does today. Mars, so cold and still now, may one day feel a softer, kinder warmth upon its frozen plains. There is nothing sudden in it, nothing to fear, only the slow and patient changing of things across time beyond counting. Like a hearth whose glow, ever so gradually, reaches a farther corner of the room. What is icebound now may not always be so in some distant and unhurried tomorrow. And still, through all of it, Mars goes on circling in the quiet. Whatever comes, whatever slow changes the long ages bring, the little red world keeps to its patient path around the sun, turning and drifting as it has for longer than we can truly imagine. Its dust settles, its frost gathers and lifts, its seasons come and go, all without haste, all without sound, like an old clock in a far room, keeping perfect time whether or not a single soul is listening. There is a deep peace in that faithfulness, in a world so calmly going on, asking nothing of anyone, simply being what it is beneath the wide and silent sky. Mars carries the name of an old god of war. It seems a strange thing to call so quiet a place, a world where nothing stirs but dust and a little wind. Long ago, peoples all across the earth looked up and saw that steady red ember among the stars, and its color made them think of blood, and so of battle. The Romans named it for their god of war, and other lands gave it names of their own gods of war and fire, each seeing the same red light. Like an old, fierce name pinned long ago to a creature that turns out to be perfectly gentle, and the world itself knows nothing of any of it, keeping its slow silence beneath a name it never asked to wear. Its two small moons carry the names of fear and dread. When they were found, they were called after the companions who, in the old stories, rode beside the god of war, one of them named for fear, the other for something close to panic. It sounds a grim pair of names for two little stones drifting quietly overhead. Yet there is nothing fearful about them at all. They are only small, dark, dusty things, going round and round without a sound, keeping their patient orbits night after night. Like two shy travelers handed frightening names by someone who never once met them. Up there in the dark, they simply circle on, gentle and harmless, indifferent to the heavy words we hung upon them. People have watched Mars with the naked eye for thousands of years, long before any glass was ground into a lens, long before anyone dreamed of sending a machine so far. Watchers on quiet rooftops followed that red point of light as it wandered among the stars. They kept careful records, night after night, marking where it stood and how it moved. Nearly every people who ever looked up came, in time, to know it. Like a familiar lamp in a distant window that generations of the same family learned, each in turn, to watch for. And so Mars was a companion of the human night for a very long while, before we ever knew what it truly was. Once, a careful watcher believed he saw fine straight lines drawn across the face of Mars. Peering through an early telescope, he traced faint markings from one region to another and set them down neatly on his maps. Others took up the idea, and for a time, some imagined great channels cut across the land, and even dreamed of who might have carved them, but the lines were never really there. They were a trick of tired eyes and trembling air, shapes the mind stitched together from scattered smudges of shadow, like the pictures we find in drifting clouds that melt away the moment we look straight at them. The real Mars, when at last we saw it clearly, held wonders enough without them. Long ago, Mars helped us learn the true shape of the planet's paths. An astronomer of old spent years wrestling with careful measurements of exactly where Mars stood, night after night, and no perfect circle would ever quite fit them. In the end, he let the circle go, and found instead that Mars moves along a gentle oval, swinging a little nearer the sun, and then a little farther away. That one stubborn puzzle quietly unlocked the way all the worlds truly travel. Like a single loose thread that once pulled unravels a knot everyone had thought was permanent. And so this small red world taught us the shape of the heavens. We travel to Mars only when a certain window quietly opens. The two worlds circle the sun, each at its own speed, and only now and then do they line up so that the crossing between them is short and kind. When that moment comes, roughly every couple of years, those who send craft outward hurry to launch while the way is gentle. Miss it, and there is nothing to do but wait for the next, like a ferry that leaves its dock only at certain hours. So a traveler must arrive in good time or sit and wait for the tide. And so our journeys to Mars keep a slow and patient rhythm all their own. Every craft we send must survive a swift fall through the thin Martian air. Coming in from the long dark, it meets the top of the atmosphere at tremendous speed, and in only a few short minutes, it must slow itself, unfold its parachute, and settle softly onto the ground. The air is so thin that this is a delicate thing, and for those waiting at home, those few minutes pass in held breath. Yet when it goes well, it goes beautifully, ending in the gentlest of touches upon the dust. Like a long dive that finishes without a ripple, hardly troubling the water at all. And then, at last, stillness, and the first quiet picture sent home. The first machines to land safely on Mars came down about half a century ago. After earlier tries that failed somewhere along the way, 2 sturdy craft settled onto the dusty plains and, for the very first time, sent home pictures from the surface itself. All at once, the red point of light became a real place, with stones and ridges and a pale sky stretching away to the horizon. Everything we sent afterward followed the trail those first quiet landers opened, like the first footprints across fresh snow, showing all who come later where the ground is firm. They rest there still, silent now, on the plains where they first touched down. More of our craft rest upon Mars than upon any other distant world. Over the long years, we have sent lander after lander, rover after rover, and one by one, they have come down upon its plains and slopes. Some still stir and work a little. Others have long since fallen silent and simply wait. Scattered across that far red ground, they make a small and lonely company of visitors from home, like a handful of lanterns set down here and there across a vast dark field, a few still glowing, the rest gone quietly out. And Mars holds them all, patient and unbothered, keeping our small machines among its dust. Some of the craft we sent carry the names of people from home. Before the last of them left the ground, many thousands upon thousands of names were gathered up and etched, very small, onto little plates of metal and carried all the way to the Martian surface. Yours may even be among them, resting now on another world while you lie here in the dark. There they sit in the cold and the quiet, tiny letters that no eye will ever read, keeping a kind of silent company with the dust, like initials carved into a far stone by someone who knew they would likely never come back to see them. A small, human touch, left gently on a distant plain. In our own evening sky, Mars glows with a steady, patient light. The far-off stars seem to shiver and flicker, their light bent this way and that by the restless air above us. But Mars, being nearer and showing a tiny round face rather than a single point, holds its glow more calmly, shining with a quiet, unwavering warmth. If you have ever noticed one reddish light that simply would not twinkle, very likely that was Mars. Like a candle flame indoors, held perfectly still, while the stars beyond the window tremble in the wind. It has kept that gentle, steady glow above us through every night of human memory. Given a little warmth and water, the soil of Mars might one day cradle green things. On its own, the ground is cold and dry and salted with strange chemicals. No place at all for anything to root. Yet in careful trials here at home, soil made to match the Martian dust has been coaxed, with patience and clean water, into feeding small growing plants. It hints that the red ground is not forever barren, only sleeping, only waiting. Like a bare winter bed that holds, unseen, the promise of a spring it has not yet been given. Whether that spring will ever come, no one can truly say, but the possibility rests quietly in the dust. Mars keeps no sea, and so its heights are measured from an imagined middle. Here at home, we count our mountains and valleys up and down from the level of the ocean. But Mars has no ocean to set that mark, no shining surface to call zero. So those who map it chose instead a smooth, invented sphere, an average of the whole round world, and measure every rise and hollow from that. Like drawing one calm, level line through a crowd of different heights, simply to have somewhere to begin. It is a quiet reminder that even the idea of high and low needs something still to rest upon. For all its cold, Mars is the world most like our own. Among all the sun's wide family, none other has days so close to ours in length, or seasons that turn as gently, or a face marked with the beds of old rivers and the ice of frozen poles. Hot, crushing worlds and frozen giants fill the rest of the family. But Mars, though thin-aired and chilly, feels almost familiar. Like a distant cousin you have never met, who nonetheless shares the family's eyes and the family's voice. Of all the far places, it is the one that most resembles a quiet, colder echo of home. One day, perhaps, a human hand will rest upon the red dust. For now, only our machines have touched that far ground, rolling and digging and watching in our place. But there are those who dream of sending people there in some later year, to stand beneath that small pale sun and look out across the rusted plains with their own eyes. It is a long and patient hope, unhurried, still mostly a thing of the imagination. Like a light glimpsed far down a road you have only just begun to walk. Whether it comes soon or late or never at all, the red world waits the same, in no hurry whatsoever. And when our own sun at last grows quiet, Mars will keep its silence too, far, far ahead, in ages almost beyond the reach of thought. The sun that lights the red world will slowly change and dim, and every planet along with it will drift into a deeper cold and stillness. There is nothing frightening in it, nothing near, only the long, gentle winding down of things across time we can barely hold in the mind. Like a house at the very end of a long evening, the last lamp softly lowered, everyone within it at rest, and Mars will still be there, turning in the dark, faithful to its path as it has always been. Tonight, we have wandered a long, slow way across a single quiet world. We drifted above the great canyon that could swallow a whole continent, and rested a while beside the tallest mountain in all the sun's family. We watched the dust storms wrap the entire planet in a soft golden haze, and the pale caps at the poles breathed slowly out and in with the seasons. We followed the two little moons on their patient rounds, traced the dry beds of rivers that stopped flowing long ago, and stood in the blue hush of a Martian evening as that small sun slipped quietly away. And here is the gentle truth to carry down with you into sleep. The red of Mars is the red of rust, of iron slowly weathered by ages of thin, dry air. And that very same iron runs quietly within you, in the blood moving through you even now, warming your hands upon the pillow. That iron, in you and in Mars alike, was forged long ago in the hearts of ancient stars, then scattered out across the dark to become worlds, and dust, and living things. So the far red world is not so distant a stranger after all. You are made of the same old star stuff, you and Mars together, quiet kin across all that empty space. Even now, as you lie here and let yourself grow heavy and calm, Mars is turning in the silence, far away. Its dust is settling softly, its frost is gathering in the cold, its two small moons are drifting on above the quiet plains, and no one at all is there to watch. It asks nothing of you. It simply goes on, patient and still, as it has for longer than we can truly imagine. And if you happen to still be awake, there is no need to stir at all. You can simply let the next quiet journey begin on its own and carry you gently onward from here. And if you would like to drift off to more journeys like this one, softly told, you might think about subscribing before you go. There is always more sky to wander, more quiet worlds to visit, one sleepy soul at a time. So let your breathing slow now, and let the red world fade softly from your mind. You have traveled a long way tonight, and there is nothing left to do but rest. May your sleep be deep and warm, and untroubled as the settled Martian dust, and may you wake gently when it is time. Sleep well now. Good night.